The morning rhythm at St. Brigid's always started with the same bright flicker of cold fluorescent lights and the smell of antiseptic in the air, sharp as citrus. I moved down the corridor toward the nurses' station, shoes squeaking on the polished tile, clipboard pressed to my hip. The sun caught along the slats of the blinds, slicing the ward into neat rectangles of gold and blue. I checked the whiteboard. 6 elective surgeries prepped for today, 3 already in pre-op. Dr. Mehta's handwriting, neat and looping, filled the margins. He liked to leave little notes, reminders that made the place hum with energy. I passed Marcus, our surgical tech, who grinned, holding up a fist for me to bump. "Big day?" he asked, eyes dancing, voice low beneath the babble of breakfast rounds. I grinned back, something warm and steady expanding in my chest. "Routine. That's the best kind." He winked, and we fell into our practiced choreography, prepping kits, double-checking labs, swapping inside jokes. Each room buzzed with that particular tension. The deep inhale before the first incision, the unspoken trust among people who'd seen each other through 12-hour shifts and midnight emergencies. There was pride in knowing we moved as a team, that our surgical outcomes were the envy of every hospital in the district. We had the wall of plaques in the lobby. We had the stories we traded on break, about patients who walked again, kids who got to go home. The sense that here, in all the mess and noise, we were doing something that mattered. I paused outside OR3, catching the faint sound of laughter echoing through the doors, and let myself believe, for a moment, that this was exactly where I was meant to be. It was on a slow Tuesday, the kind that drags out with overcast skies pressed against the windows, that I noticed the first odd thing. I was logging in pre-op notes when I set the day's surgery schedule side by side with last month's. My finger hovered over the spreadsheet, tracing lines that didn't quite add up. I leaned closer. 3 appendectomies rescheduled in the same week, each pushed forward after being bumped from their original slot. 2 hernia repairs that seemed to have swapped dates, apparently without reason. My pulse gave a little electric jolt. Maybe just a clerical error, a typo, someone clicking the wrong field late at night. But as I cross-checked the operation logs with the rescheduling paperwork, I saw it again. Clusters of elective cases, shuffled and then logged as completed sooner than seemed likely. A low hum started in the back of my mind. I felt the air around the monitor grow chillier, my breath shallow as I scrolled backward, searching for a pattern I couldn't quite name. It was subtle, the kind of thing you only spot if you're used to watching the numbers tick upward, week after week. I told myself not to overthink it. But the more I looked, the more it seemed like the numbers were being nudged, just enough to matter, just enough to hide in plain sight. I glanced over my shoulder, as if someone might be watching. The next day, in the break room, I overheard 2 junior nurses whispering near the fridge, their voices clipped and careful. One of them, the new girl, Natalie, fumbled with her coffee lid, eyes darting past me as if she'd been caught doing something wrong. "Hey," I said, smiling, trying to sound casual. "You guys okay?" She nodded too quickly, hair falling over her eyes. "Yeah, just a lot of, last-minute changes this week." "Makes you dizzy." The other nurse, Erin, snorted quietly. "That's why I never plan my weekends anymore." There was a beat of silence, thick with something unspoken. Natalie's hands shook just a bit as she stirred her coffee, the spoon tapping the mug in a nervous staccato. Erin met my eyes, then looked away. "You know how it is. Orders from upstairs. Just follow the list and don't ask." The fluorescent light above us flickered, casting harsh shadows across the chipped table. I realized then that they weren't just tired, they were on guard, measuring every word. My mouth went dry. I wanted to ask more, but something in their posture warned me off. Instead, I murmured, "Yeah, I get it," and let the conversation die, the taste of burnt coffee lingering at the back of my throat. By mid-afternoon, after shifting another patient's slot with a single terse email from the admin team, I found myself alone in the supply closet, organizing bandages just to have a reason to breathe. The faint thump of feet in the hallway carried through the thin door. I was restocking the top shelf when I heard the door creak behind me. Dr. Sitar, the senior surgeon on call, slipped in, his white coat haloed in the dim light. He didn't smile. "You seem busy lately," he said, voice so soft I felt it more than heard it. I set down the box of gauze, trying to keep my face neutral. "Just catching up. Things have been hectic." He nodded slowly, the lines deepening at the corners of his mouth. No need to get too curious about the paperwork, he said. Numbers get messy. Focus on the patients. A cold ripple moved through me. I forced a swallow, felt my heart stutter in my chest. Of course, my only concern is making sure everyone's safe. He watched me for a long moment, the silence pressing in, thick as syrup. Then he turned to go, pausing with his hand on the door. Some questions come with consequences, he said finally, eyes flat and unreadable. You know how things are. He left me standing among the boxes, the air tight and stale. My hands trembled as I reached for the shelf again, the meaning in his words sinking deeper than I wanted to admit. It was suddenly so clear how quickly routine could harden into something else, how even pride could turn brittle and trust could start to fray. I stood alone in the hush, pulse echoing in my ears, and wondered, where exactly did the line begin to blur? The overhead fluorescence hummed as I pulled another stack of patient files toward me, the paper edges scraping dry against my fingertips. The logbook's spine creaked when I spread it open, every column of numbers and scribbled notes daring me to spot the glitch. On the top sheet, yet another elective knee replacement, postponed twice, and the second sign-off didn't match the attending surgeon's usual signature. My breath snagged at the back of my throat. I traced the signature with my thumb, the ink faint and hurried, like whoever signed it didn't want to be recognized. There was a pulsing at my temples, a steady thump behind my eyes as I flipped through the previous month's logs. Another hip, an ablation, both bounced around the schedule, the paperwork tight but somehow too clean. The more I saw, the heavier my chest felt, like something thick had settled just beneath my ribs. This couldn't be a coincidence. I could feel the pressure building, a gnawing sense that I was standing on the edge of something much bigger than a simple scheduling error. A faint cough from the hallway jolted me, and I snapped the folder shut, palms clammy, eyes scanning for any sign that someone had seen me. For a second, I wondered if I was supposed to find this, or if I was already too late. I clutched the folder to my chest and made my way to the administrator's office, my sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. Behind the frosted glass, the light was always a little too bright, the air a few degrees colder. I knocked, bracing myself as the door slid open and revealed Ms. Larkin, her mouth a taut line. She didn't invite me in. Is this urgent? Her voice was clipped, the syllables sharp. I hesitated, the folder suddenly heavy in my arms. There are some irregularities in the elective surgery logs, I managed, my voice smaller than I meant. A lot of reschedules and signatures that don't match. I watched her face for a flicker, surprise, guilt, anything, but her eyes stayed flat, unreadable. She took the folder from me with 2 fingers, not meeting my gaze. We're aware of the backlog. Surgeons are stretched, and some paperwork gets routed differently. She placed the folder on her desk without opening it. If there's a specific concern, put it in writing. Otherwise, focus on patient care. Heat crept up my neck, prickling my scalp. It was like talking to a wall, one that had learned how to talk back. I just think. Thank you, she interrupted, already turning to her computer screen, dismissing me like just another email. I stood there for another second, every instinct screaming that something was wrong. My hand twitched at my side, aching to snatch the folder back, but I knew I couldn't push further, not yet. I found Jody in the break room, her hands wrapped tight around a paper cup. The TV muttered in the background, a weather update no one listened to. I slid into the chair beside her, my voice low. Have you noticed anything weird with the surgery schedule? I asked, hoping for relief, for her to laugh it off. She didn't look at me. You should leave it alone. Her knuckles were white, nails digging crescents into the cup. The room felt colder, the distant beeping of monitors suddenly more urgent. I tried again, softer. Jody, they're switching dates, forging signatures. She cut me off, voice barely above a whisper. We all know. Nobody talks about it. She glanced at the doorway. Last time someone made noise, their hours got cut. You want to risk that? My skin prickled, nerves firing like static. Over by the sink, Gavin muttered to no one. They say if the numbers drop, the funding gets slashed. That's all that matters now. I caught his eye, but he looked away, shoulders hunched. The unspoken warning in the air was palpable. Keep quiet, protect your job. A silence settled over us, heavy as a stone. I stared at the scuffed table, the words spinning in my head, louder than the TV or the clatter of someone's spoon. After my shift, I sat in my car, keys dangling uselessly in my hand. The windshield fogged up with my breath. I could see my own reflection, eyes rimmed red, lips pressed thin. If I reported this, patients could get caught in the fallout, delays, denials of care, maybe worse. But the longer I stayed silent, the more complicit I became. My pulse thudded in my wrist, an ache that wouldn't fade. I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles aching. Every scenario raced through my head: losing my job, dragging my friends down with me, or watching another name slip into the logs, rearranged and erased. A fresh wave of guilt swept over me, hot and sour. I wanted to believe I was protecting people. But at what cost? The weight of my own inaction pressed down, suffocating. I closed my eyes and breathed out, slow and shaky, knowing I couldn't stand here much longer, teetering between doing the right thing and keeping my world intact. I opened my eyes, staring at the flickering parking lot lights, and realized the decision wouldn't wait for me. Not much longer, not after what I'd seen. I watched the copier light sweep over the stack of memos, each page warm against my fingertips, the faint chemical scent clinging to the air between shifts. The hum of the machine seemed louder in the empty break room, amplifying the weight of what I'd found. I'd started with the operation logs, but the real gut punch came when I opened the folder marked quarterly funding. I blinked at the highlighted lines, words merging and separating: procedure volume projections, incentive bonus allocation, variance from baseline justifies budget increase. My chest felt tight, heart thudding as I read the connecting arrows someone had drawn: operation numbers, budget jumps, memos about strategic scheduling. The numbers weren't just numbers. They were currency, tickets to more funding, more power. Every unnecessary surgery inflated a line in this spreadsheet, and the higher the count, the fatter the reward. The realization made my palms sweat, guilt pooling in my stomach. Had I handed someone's chart across the desk just so they could make rent, or win a plaque? I couldn't stop picturing the faces: Mrs. Carlson with her nervous smile, young Jamal cradling his arm, believing we were helping. Outside the window, the city lights bled into the dark, indifferent to my small revelation. But I couldn't shake the sense that I just stepped past some invisible line, that nothing would look the same in the morning. I heard footsteps echo down the hall, hurried, then the door swung open so hard it rattled the mop bucket. Dr. Avery stood there, white coat crisp, glasses glinting in the fluorescent glare. His voice had an edge I'd never heard before. "We need to discuss those reschedules. Now." My breath snagged, the urge to hide the papers almost overwhelming. His eyes darted from my hand to the copier and back. I tried to steady my voice, but it sounded thin. "They're asking about last week's numbers." He stepped closer, lowering his tone, but the threat was unmistakable. "You want to keep your job? You want to see this unit survive?" His words came in a hiss. "You keep quiet. Everyone wins. Start talking." And he let it hang there, but I felt it like a slap. I could feel my pulse in my neck, hot and fast. The room seemed to shrink. My mind flashed through all the times I'd covered for a late chart or a missed signature, each one now reeking of complicity. He wasn't asking, he was daring me. He leaned in, his breath sharp with coffee. "Don't be naive. No one's clean. You talk, and your name gets dragged, too." He snapped the door shut behind him, leaving a chill in his wake. I stood there, papers trembling in my hand, the copier's hum now a taunt. I wondered if anyone else had seen what I'd seen, or if this was my mess alone to clean up. After shift, I slipped into the supply closet where Jen and Marcus were already waiting. The bleach smell stung my nose, and the overhead bulb made everything look a little sick. Jen's arms were folded tight, and Marcus kept running his thumb over his phone screen, not really looking at either of us. I slid the funding memo across a shelf. "It's all here. The numbers, the bonuses. It's not just mistakes. It's deliberate." Marcus let out a low whistle, shaking his head. Jen's jaw clenched. "If we go to admin with this, we're done. They'll close ranks." Her voice was barely above a whisper. I swallowed, throat dry. "But if we don't, how long till someone gets hurt?" The question hung heavy, impossible to answer. Marcus shifted, eyes darting to the door. "There's gotta be another way. Anonymous tip, something." He didn't sound convinced. Jen's gaze was hard. "They always find out. People like Avery, he'll crush us." A surge of frustration tightened my fists. "So what, we just sign off on it? Pretend none of this matters?" No one answered. I could hear my own breathing, harsh against the steady tick of the clock above the door. There was no good option. Just the misery of choosing. Somewhere down the hall, a code alarm blared, sharp and urgent. My whole body tensed, as if the world itself was warning us we were out of time. I was back on the unit the next afternoon when the air shifted, low voices, a nurse running. I caught the tail end of a conversation at the nurse's station. Rescheduled again. She spiked a fever, septic now. I walked faster, my badge jostling against my chest. I saw the chart first. Mrs. Carlson. Her surgery had been bumped twice to clear space for priority procedures. Now she was burning up, IVs snaking across her arms. Her husband stood at her bedside, eyes wide, helpless. Her breathing was too fast, her skin the color of porcelain. I pressed a cool cloth to her forehead, willing myself not to shake. The doctor's voice was clipped. Move her to ICU, now. I caught the edge of panic in his tone. Every beep of the monitor seemed to count down to something I couldn't stop. If we'd kept her original slot, would she be here now, fighting for her life? My jaw ached from clenching, a cold dread crawling through me. I looked at her husband, searching his face for blame. But all I saw was trust, undiluted faith that we knew what we were doing. My hands stung with the weight of it. I stepped out, needing air, but the hallway felt even smaller, thick with the ghosts of choices made for someone else's gain. I stared at the operation logs one more time, my finger tracing the jagged line of dates and initials. My own handwriting was there, again and again, co-signed beneath Avery's. Each signature was a tiny betrayal, a piece of myself given away for nothing. My chest felt hollow, but steady. I scrolled through the hospital's reporting protocol, the tiny print blurring as I reread the steps. Document, submit, wait. I opened the portal, attaching the funding memo and the logs, my hands cold but certain. I typed only what I could prove, my confession squeezed into half a dozen lines. I hovered over the submit button, knowing that once I pressed it, there was no undoing any of this. A tremor ran through me, but I pressed anyway. The confirmation message blinked back, silent and final. Outside, the hallway lights flickered, casting long shadows along the linoleum. Somewhere, I heard the distant clatter of a gurney wheels, the world moving on, unaware. I slid my phone into my pocket, pulse finally slowing, numb and raw all at once. Somewhere behind me, a door creaked open, someone coming, or maybe just the wind. I didn't turn to look. The usual morning handoff was a wall of tight faces, not the half-bored chatter I'd gotten used to. Clipboard in hand, I hovered at the edge of the nurse's station, the room fluorescent bright and silent except for the hum of the vending machine. My manager, Linda, cleared her throat, voice too loud. Before we get started, everyone, there's an inquiry. The words landed like broken glass. I felt eyes on my back, but when I looked, nobody met my gaze. My chest tightened as Linda read out the memo, her voice losing its practiced warmth. She avoided saying what was actually happening. No one said, whistleblower, but it was floating there, a bad smell. I pressed my thumb to my palm so hard it left a dent. Every shift had become a guessing game. Who knew, who suspected, who would talk to me now? I waited for someone to crack a joke, lighten the tension. Instead, the silence stretched, then swelled. I wondered if I'd ever get that version of my team back. In that moment, the inquiry was less frightening than the way everyone seemed to pull away from each other, like the center had dropped out. Linda's voice dropped, almost a whisper. You'll be contacted if you're needed. I nodded, but the words meant nothing. The air in that room tasted of caution, and I wanted to be anywhere else. Someone's phone buzzed, a sharp note in the hush. I flinched. A voice. Guess we're all suspects now. Half a laugh, but no one joined in. Behind my mask, my mouth went dry. I watched as 3 senior nurses peeled off together, their heads close, whispering. There was a time I would have gone with them. Now, my shoes squeaked as I walked away alone, heat crawling up my neck. As the first days of the inquiry dragged on, the department turned brittle. People stopped sharing snacks in the break room. I caught snatches of conversations that stopped when I entered. Tasks were assigned with clipped efficiency. It felt like working in a house after an argument, everyone pretending nothing had changed, but no one looking each other in the eye. I caught my reflection in the elevator doors, dark circles, hair escaping from its tie. I didn't recognize the expression, something between defiance and regret. I wondered if I'd made a mistake or if this was what doing the right thing looked like. At lunch, I sat with my back to the wall, coffee cooling in my hands. My friend Joel hesitated before sitting across from me, glancing around. He kept his voice low. "You holding up?" There was a gentleness, but also distance, like he was checking for a fever he hoped not to catch. I tried to smile. "I'm fine." The words felt borrowed, not mine. He fiddled with his spoon, eyes darting. "People are talking. Says you should have gone to Linda first." I wanted to ask what he thought, but I was afraid of the answer. A group of nurses entered, laughing too loudly, and Joel stood up, tray in hand. "I'll see you around." The chair scraped as he left, and I felt the space he'd vacated, bigger than seemed possible. The rest of my shift blurred together. My hands moved through automatic motions, checking vitals, updating charts, each interaction laced with something sour. I overheard a tech murmur, "That's her," as I passed. My chest ached, hollow and exposed. By the time I clocked out, I could barely remember what normal used to feel like. I wondered if I'd ever stop being the reason other people lowered their voices. The inquiry lasted longer than anyone expected. One afternoon, Linda called me into her office, her eyes red-rimmed, the blinds half closed against gray light. She handed me a stack of papers, operation logs, rescheduling forms, funding memos. "There's more to this," she said quietly. She pushed a memo across the desk, sections highlighted in yellow. I skimmed it, heart pounding. Regional funding was being quietly slashed. The pressure to keep elective surgery numbers up wasn't just coming from our department. It was everywhere, a survival tactic. I gripped the edge of the chair, knuckles white. "So, it's not just us?" My breath caught. The room shrank and expanded at once. She shook her head, voice brittle. "Every hospital in the region. They're gaming the numbers to keep the lights on." The memo detailed instructions: reclassify, reschedule, keep the volume up. Not fraud in the classic sense, but carefully massaged data, sanctioned higher up. A chill spread down my arms. I'd pictured a villain, a mastermind, but it was something quieter, more systemic. I wanted to ask if it mattered that I tried to fix it. The answer was written in the lines on Linda's face. A nurse I barely knew hovered in the doorway. "They want you upstairs." Her tone was neutral, practiced. I wondered if she pitied me, or resented me, or if she was just glad to be on the sidelines. As I walked the hallway, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, I tried to piece together what this meant. The problem was bigger than any one person, and all of us had been carrying it without ever admitting it out loud. After the inquiry ended, a memo went out to the entire hospital. New protocols, stricter scheduling, more oversight. No mention of how we'd gotten here, just a quiet acknowledgement that the numbers needed to be aligned with best practices. Colleagues nodded at me in the hall, polite but distant. A few stopped talking when I approached. Others made forced attempts at small talk, as if to prove nothing had happened. The air was thinner, conversations cautious. Linda caught me by the elevators one evening, her hands stuffed into the pockets of her cardigan. "Things will settle down," she said, voice tired. "Give it time." I wanted to believe her. Charts still needed updating, patients still needed care, but nothing fit quite right. Even the coffee tasted different, metallic and sharp. One day, I found my favorite mug missing from the break room. The shelf where it used to live was empty except for a thin line of dust. I stared at the space for longer than I should have, feeling the weight of everything unsaid. I helped a new nurse with a tricky IV. She smiled at me, grateful, but her thanks felt formal, like a line from a script. I missed the easy camaraderie, the shorthand jokes. I wondered if things would ever go back, or if this was the start of something else. In the quiet after my shift, I stood in the stairwell, cold brick pressing against my back. I could still hear the echo of laughter from before all this, a ghost of what used to be. I thought about the next shift, the next routine. Maybe that's what we were left with. Not resolution, but the slow attempt to build something new, even if the cracks showed. Just as I reached for the door, my phone buzzed, a message from Joel. "Coffee?" 2 words. Neutral, but something in me flickered. Maybe this wasn't over, not quite. The hallway lights hum overhead, softer now that things have settled, or maybe I just noticed them more. My badge feels heavier against my chest, pressing cold into my skin as I stand at the nurse's station. There's a new schedule taped up, fewer surgeries, days with wide open blocks. It should feel like a win, but the air is weighted, conversations clipped. Joan catches my eye as she logs vitals, but she looks away just as quickly, and I'm reminded of the gap I put between us. I turned the pen in my fingers, remembering the morning I handed the logs to risk management, my hands trembling so badly I nearly dropped them. There's an official memo about process improvements tacked to the wall, but no one says what really happened. Every shift, I trace the outline of what's changed. I breathe in, and the antiseptic smell is sharper, almost metallic. In the quiet moments, I replay that last conversation with Dr. Lee. His voice was flat, tired. "You did what you thought was right," he said, not quite looking at me. My pulse jumped at his words. I wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at the edges. "We keep working, all of us, but something went out of the department when the numbers dropped." I think about the patients who might never know how close they came to being statistics. I wonder if I've really helped, or just broken something no one can fix. Every time another memo comes down, I flinch, half expecting my name to appear. The urge to check the logs hasn't gone away. I still scroll through them late in the break room, heart thumping, eyes scanning for patterns. There's no comfort, only routine, and questions that don't let go. If I was brave or reckless. If tomorrow, I'll find something worse. The elevator doors scrape open and the sudden quiet hits me harder than I expect. I linger by the nurse's station, fingers tracing the ridge of my badge, feeling the edge press into my thumb. My shift's over, but I can't bring myself to sign out. In the staff lounge, someone's left the lights half dimmed, a tray of stale brownies sitting untouched beside the coffee urn. I stare through the glass at the parking lot, the sodium lamps outside flickering in the rain. My mind keeps rolling back to the phone call, HR's clipped voice, those careful questions about the incident report. There's a cold spot at the base of my neck that won't go away. I picture myself walking out for good, handing over my keys, returning the badge. My chest tightens. The thought is almost a relief, but also terrifying. I know what would follow. Whispers, stories, that feeling of being watched even after you're gone. I hear the janitor's cart squeak past the door. I remember the faces of the patients last week, especially Mrs. Carrington with her blue veins and the anxious way she gripped my hand before they wheeled her in. An elective surgery, on a number that shouldn't have existed. My legs feel heavy. If I leave now, the numbers will keep climbing, unchallenged. If I stay, I might take the fall, or worse, I could end up part of it. My pulse pounds in my throat, a steady, angry beat. I reach for my phone, thumb hovering over a half-finished message to the hospital ombudsman. My breathing slows as I make my decision. I can't unsee what I've seen. I have to do this the right way, I whisper, and the sound of my voice in the empty room makes me flinch. I know now, no one else is going to fix this. I wipe my palms on my scrubs and step back into the hallway, feeling gravity pull hard in both directions. Down the hall, a shadow moves behind a frosted window. For a moment, I wonder if someone is waiting for me. The floor creaks, but nobody appears. I realize it's just the building settling, or maybe my nerves. I walk toward the records office, every footstep echoing louder than it should. I pause at the door, my hand trembling as I slide my badge through the reader. The green light flashes. Inside, the usual hum of servers is louder tonight, the air cooler, antiseptic. I tell myself I'll just print the logs, one last backup, just in case. My heart's pounding for reasons that have nothing to do with running. There's no turning back now, but I can't help wishing there was an easier way. I stuff the printouts deep in my backpack, feeling both exposed and strangely weightless. Outside, the rain is harder, washing the glass with sheets of silver. I picture the path ahead, meetings, interviews, maybe a tribunal, the possibility of losing my license. It's a future I can't see clearly, except that it's coming fast. Even as I leave, the hospital behind me feels alive, like it's watching. My resolve is brittle but real. I'll do what I must, no matter what it costs. The next morning, I drive through gray dawn, city streets blurred by rain and exhaustion. Every light turns red. I notice how tired everyone looks, how the line of cars outside the Starbucks moves with mechanical patience. I check my rearview mirror out of habit, half expecting someone to be following me. My hands ache from gripping the wheel. At the stoplight, I think of Dr. Patel's face when I confronted him about the numbers. How his voice dropped, eyes darted away. "You don't understand the pressure we're under," he'd said, not quite meeting my gaze. I think I do now. There's no single villain here, no clean line between right and wrong. There's just a system that bends everyone until we're all complicit, in ways we barely notice. The engine idles, heater rattling. I feel a strange calm settle in, heavy and cool. I realize the rules I grew up believing in, fairness, honesty, the idea that good people win, don't hold much sway here. The real world is messier. Most days, compromise gets disguised as duty, and fear as reason. My phone vibrates, a message from HR blinking on the lock screen. I hesitate, thumb hovering, heart thudding. I'm not sure if I'm about to become a whistleblower or a scapegoat, or maybe both. The light turns green. I drive forward, not knowing if anyone will be waiting for me at the end of this road. Rows of black umbrellas moved like slow shadows across the gravel as I stepped out of the car, cold drizzle needling the back of my neck. The air held a heaviness that pressed down on my shoulders while I watched my brother, Alex, light a cigarette with shaking hands, pretending not to see me. My sister, June, kept her chin tucked low, eyes rimmed red, her husband hovering nearby like a nervous ghost. I caught a waft of wet earth as I followed them, crunching through puddles toward the tent with the casket beneath. Aunt Linda dabbed at her eyes, though I couldn't remember the last time she'd called. My pulse thudded in my ears. I tried not to look at the polished box, tried not to picture Dad inside. Someone murmured my name. I nodded but kept my head down, the smell of rain and lilies too thick, my throat closing. The pastor's voice, flat and gentle, drifted over us. I heard words about strength, about love, about the enduring bonds of family, but my mind snagged on the word, enduring. Alex shifted beside me, shoulders tight, and June's hand found his for a second before slipping away. In that moment, I felt further from them than I'd ever been. I glanced up and caught June's eye. Her mouth pressed a thin line, like she was holding something back. I wished I could ask her what, but the words stuck. The rest of the world blurred, rain pattering on the canvas, and for a second I wondered if any of us really belonged here, or if we were just actors in Dad's last, unfinished scene. The crowd thinned after the final prayer, umbrellas folding, voices hushed. June stood by the tent's edge, clutching a stack of papers, her hands trembling. I watched her speak quietly with the lawyer, Mr. Grady, who nodded grimly before signaling for everyone's attention. Alex flicked his cigarette away. I felt my breath hitch as the group drew closer, a nervous energy running like static between us. June cleared her throat, glancing at me before turning to the gathered faces. She held up the papers. Dad asked that his will be read now. He wanted everyone here. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I remembered Dad saying something different, something about waiting, about giving us time. My fingers curled into fists. Mr. Grady's voice was tinny under the tent, but June interrupted. "I'll do it," she said, a little too loud. She unfolded the envelope with shaking hands. Her eyes scanned the page, then she began to read. Our father leaves the house and all assets to June Elizabeth Wallace. The remainder of the estate is to be divided as she sees fit. There was a stunned silence, broken only by the whisper of rain on canvas. Alex stared at June, mouth open. I felt my heartbeat in my throat. That wasn't what Dad told me. He promised we'd split things equally. I felt the ground tilt, the familiar world slipping. Aunt Linda gasped. Someone let out a low whistle. I couldn't move, my mind scrambling for sense, searching for the words I'd heard Dad say by his hospital bed: fairness, no favorites, you, Alex, and June, together. I looked at June, searching for a sign, a tremor, a secret smile, anything. But her face was pale, blank, almost frightened. The will in her hand shook like a leaf. My voice came out cracked. That isn't what he said. That's not the will he showed me. Alex's jaw clenched. What the hell, June? He promised. He told all of us. Where's the real will? June's voice broke. This is what Mr. Grady gave me. I just read what's here. She wouldn't look at me. Aunt Linda stepped forward, voice trembling. I remember him saying you three would share everything. Why would he change his mind? Around us, murmurs rose. Mr. Grady looked pained. This is the only will I have on file. It's signed and dated. Alex shoved his hands into his pockets, shaking his head. No way. He'd never do that. Not to us. Not after everything. The air thickened. I could taste something metallic behind my teeth, a sharpness that felt like betrayal. My memory kept flickering to Dad's hospital room, the way his hand gripped mine, his words about trust. None of this fit. I stepped closer to June, trying to keep my voice steady. When did he sign that? Where's the one he wrote last year? Her eyes flickered, darting to Mr. Grady. This is all I have. I didn't see any others. Alex snorted. Convenient. You just happened to get everything, and we're supposed to believe that? The lawyer tried to hold up his hands. Please, this is a difficult day. If there are questions, we can address them. Alex cut him off. Don't patronize us. This doesn't make sense. Someone changed something. I felt the ache in my chest tighten, a low heat rising in my face. The family's eyes, some wide, some narrowed, bounced between us, waiting for someone to say what we were all thinking. June's voice was thin, barely above a whisper. You think I'd do that? You think I'd lie about Dad? I wanted to say no, but the words died. I just stared at her, heart pounding, all the old resentments flickering behind my eyes. Alex stepped forward, voice harsh. I want to see every scrap of paper. I want proof. Otherwise, I'm talking to a real lawyer. Aunt Linda shook her head, tears starting again. We're family. We're supposed to trust each other. No one replied. I could hear Alex's breath, uneven and angry. June's shoulders sagged, her grip on the will tight enough to crumple the edge. The pastor quietly ushered people out, but I lingered, watching June gather the documents into her bag. My hands felt numb. Alex muttered to himself, pacing the mud, voice too low to catch. I waited until the tent was almost empty. June glanced up, her eyes rimmed with tears she kept swallowing back. I stepped toward her, the damp air cool in my lungs. June, I said quietly, what really happened? She closed her eyes, jaw working. I didn't want this. I swear. When Mr. Grady gave me the envelope, I thought it was a mistake. I watched the knuckles of her hand go white. Then show us. Let's look through everything. All of us. She hesitated, and in that hesitation I felt the whole shape of our childhood, secrets behind closed doors, things left unsaid. Alex joined us, voice tight. If you're hiding something, June. I'm not, she snapped, but her voice wavered. I don't know how this happened. I caught her gaze, searching for some flicker of truth or guilt. Did Dad talk to you? About anything he wanted changed? June shook her head. No. He was confused near the end. But he never said this. Alex rubbed his face, dragging his palm down hard. Someone's lying. I don't care who. I'm finding out. For a moment, none of us spoke. Outside, the sky brightened just enough to cast the ground in a flat, colorless light. The will in June's hand seemed suddenly heavier, as if it carried the weight of everything we'd never said. I realized I no longer knew who to believe. And as June reached for her bag, I wondered what else might be hidden inside. My sister's foot knocked against the table leg, a dull, echoing thud, as the lawyer thumbed through a thick manila folder. The room was too warm, the blinds letting in a haze of sunlight that made the dust visible in the air. He adjusted his glasses, not meeting our eyes, and cleared his throat. My heart pulsed hard in my neck, tight, mechanical thumps. I tried to keep my hand still in my lap, knuckles white, nails pressed into skin. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful, almost rehearsed. The will creates grounds for a contest, if you wish. It's not unheard of. I didn't look at my sister, but I heard her sharp inhale. The word, contest, sounded like a threat and a promise at the same time. Heat rose in my chest, a mix of hope and fear. What if we could change this? What if we couldn't? He slid a packet across the table, eyes flicking up for only a second. You'll need evidence, patterns of behavior, anything odd in her last weeks. My sister's jaw worked. Like what? He didn't answer directly, just tapped the folder, then looked away. There was something slippery about all of it, as if the truth were right there, just out of reach. I left with a burning in my stomach, knowing we had to start digging. The sidewalk outside the firm was cold, shaded by the overhang, and my sister's breath came out in a little cloud. Let's go to the house. Her voice was flat, but there was something under it, a tremor. We drove in silence mostly, the air between us jittery and thick. The house felt different now, as if it didn't recognize us, or maybe the other way around. The furniture was still arranged the way she liked it, magazines fanned on the coffee table, the blue vase in the window. I started with the desk drawers, hands moving on autopilot. Receipts, notepads, a scattering of pens. My sister was upstairs, footsteps muffled on the carpet. Under a pile of clipped coupons, I found a folded sheet. A schedule written in my mother's handwriting, days blocked off, little notes along the margin, doctor, groceries, Judy's birthday. But next to it, a different hand had scribbled names and times. I traced the loop of the J, trying to make sense of it. My skin felt prickly, cold sweat breaking out along my upper lip. I wondered if I was missing something obvious, something she'd tried to tell us. My sister called from the hallway, voice tight. "Come look at this." I climbed the stairs fast, pulse drumming, hoping for anything that would explain the sudden change. She was holding a box. Photos. And these. She handed me a stack of business cards. Private caregivers. A few with numbers circled in red ink. The sense of determination solidified in me. A bone-deep need to know who else had been in her life at the end. I held one of the cards, thumb tracing the raised ink. My breathing was sharp, almost ragged. The silence in the room felt loaded. The name on the card was familiar, but I couldn't place it. My sister leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. She never mentioned them. I shook my head, throat dry. Had we missed something? Or had it all happened so fast we hadn't noticed? The anxiety from the lawyer's office lingered, but now it twisted into something sharper, suspicion. Downstairs, the phone rang, startling us both. My sister ran to answer. A woman's voice came through, brisk, professional. "This is Mara. I helped your mother in her last weeks." Something inside me went cold. I watched my sister's face, saw the confusion flicker across it. I reached for the notepad, scribbling down the name. "Can we meet?" I asked, my voice uneven, but steady enough. Mara hesitated, then murmured, "Yes. Tomorrow. I'll tell you what I know." The line went dead, leaving a hum in the air. I pressed my palm to my chest, trying to slow my breathing. There was a strange relief in the idea of answers, but it mixed with an unease I couldn't shake. My sister was pacing, hands clenched. Why didn't Mom tell us? The question hung there, heavy as lead. I remembered her last days, how tired she was, how she pulled away. I watched the shadows change across the carpet, the late light sinking lower. Maybe we'd been looking away, too afraid to see what was right in front of us. The next afternoon, Mara met us at the little cafe by the hospital. She was younger than I expected, hair pulled back tight, voice careful. She ordered tea and wrapped her hands around the mug like she needed the warmth. I tried to read her face, searching for any flicker of guilt or discomfort. My sister tapped at her phone under the table. Mara's eyes darted between us. "Your mother was very private. She didn't want to worry you." My jaw tightened. Did she talk about her will? Mara hesitated, then shook her head. "I was there when she made changes. There was someone else." The skin along my arms prickled, a crawling unease. "Who?" I asked, not trusting my own voice. She glanced away, the pause stretching out. "A friend. I think his name was Bruce." My sister looked at me, lines deepening around her mouth. "Bruce? Family friend Bruce?" Mara nodded. "He signed something. I'm not sure what." I pressed my fingers into my leg, grounding myself. Everything felt suddenly off balance, as if the floor had tilted. After Mara left, my sister and I sat in silence, the last of the tea cooling between us. I replayed the conversation, looking for something I'd missed. The idea that Bruce, trustworthy, always steady, had been involved made my stomach clench. I remembered the way he'd hugged us at the funeral, arms too tight, words too smooth. Had he known then what we didn't? My phone buzzed with a new message, a number I didn't recognize. The words were simple: "We need to talk." Bruce. I stared at the screen, feeling the ground shift again beneath my feet. I wasn't sure if I wanted the answer, but I knew he couldn't back out now. The notary's office was smaller than I expected, crowded with ring binders and that sweet rot smell of old paper. I watched the secretary's fingers hesitate over the keyboard as she pulled up the logbooks. When she finally found my mother's file, her brow creased. My heart started thudding in my throat. I leaned forward. The log showed just a date and a scribbled signature. No details about who was present or what was signed. No copy of the will itself, just a notation. One document, sealed. My stomach gave a little lurch. All those stories of fraud and exploitation on late-night news, suddenly not just stories. If the will was legitimate, why was the record so bare, so rushed? The secretary glanced up, uncertain. "That's all we have on file." Her voice was thin. I managed a thank you, but the words tasted sour. What else was missing, hidden, or deliberately erased? I stepped out into glare, the official stamp of the notary feeling less like proof and more like an accusation. My mind buzzed. If this was so sloppy, what else had someone gotten away with? The sidewalk felt uneven under my shoes, and a distant siren seemed to sharpen the edges of my doubt. This wasn't just an oversight, someone wanted as little trace as possible. When I got home, my brother was already there, slouched on the couch with a beer. He didn't look up. The tension in his jaw was new, but the way he ignored me, old, familiar. I dropped the folder on the coffee table. The notary's record is a joke. Did you know Mom changed the will last minute? He snorted, eyes still fixed on the muted TV. You're always looking for a conspiracy. Some of us were actually here at the end. The words stung, sharp and practiced. My cheeks went hot. You think I wanted to be 3 states away? You never called me. He set his beer down too hard. You always had an excuse. Work, boyfriend, grad school. When it mattered, you weren't here. My hands trembled, anger mixing with a sharper ache. The old bitterness was back, sliding between us like a blade. I wanted to shout, to make him see how scared I was that we'd lost Mom and now maybe everything else. Instead, I just said, we're supposed to be on the same side. He finally looked at me, eyes bloodshot, mouth a hard line. For a second, it seemed like he might apologize, or at least soften. But he just shook his head and looked away. We weren't going to get anywhere like this. And I could feel the investigation starting to slip through my fingers. The next morning, I found Joan, Mom's caregiver, out back on the porch, smoking. The thin blue smoke curled around her face, and she tapped ash into a chipped mug. She looked up when I stepped outside, her expression wary but tired. You got more questions? I nodded, but my throat was tight. Why did Mom change the will? Did someone push her? My words sounded brittle in the cold air. Joan hesitated, glancing at her hands. I didn't push nothing. She wanted to make things easier. For me, too. Her voice wavered at the end. That caught me off guard. Easier how? Joan pressed her lips together, looking away. You know what home health pays? You think I could keep up with rent after she went? She stubbed out the cigarette. I loved your mom, but when she offered, it seemed like a blessing. My chest tightened. Need, opportunity, desperation. How much had that colored her choices? Or Mom's? Joan met my eyes. You think I could force her into anything? She was stronger than all of us. But her voice shook, and I couldn't tell if it was from guilt or just the cold. There was something in her pain that made me hesitate, but I couldn't let go of my suspicion. Not when there was still so much I didn't know. It was nearly noon when my phone vibrated. A message from my sister, just a screenshot of a lawyer's contact card. I called her back, my heart thumping. She picked up on the first ring. Enough, she said. I talked to a lawyer. If you keep digging, I'll contest the will myself. Her voice was clipped, brittle. A wave of panic swept over me. You'd risk everything, just to shut me up? She sighed, and I could picture her pacing, hand pressed to her forehead. We can't afford a legal war. You know how much it'll cost? My mouth was dry. I thought of the house, of Mom's smile, of every holiday in that kitchen. If we do nothing, we lose her for good. Silence on the line, heavy and stretched. Then she said, you're going to ruin us. I almost dropped the phone. The threat hung there, thicker than the humidity in the hallway. I could hear my own breath, shallow and quick. She wasn't bluffing. And suddenly, I wasn't sure I was brave enough to find the truth, if it meant losing my family for good. 3 hours later, the doorbell rang, a hesitant, 2-note chime. I opened the door to find Uncle Pete, Dad's cousin, standing with a manila envelope. He looked nervous. I heard what's going on, he said, nodding at the living room where my brother and I sat. He perched awkwardly on the arm of the sofa, pulled out a folded stack of papers. Your mom asked me to witness something, months ago. She was worried about mixing things up. I reached for the envelope, pulse skittering. Inside was a photocopy of an older will, signed and witnessed, along with a note in my mother's spidery script. Keep this safe, just in case. The relief hit me so hard I almost laughed. It wasn't just the paper, it was a piece of Mom I thought I'd lost. I glanced at my brother, his mouth partway open, a new uncertainty in his eyes. Uncle Pete watched us, fidgeting. I don't know who talked her into changing it again. But she trusted you two to figure it out. For the first time in days, I let myself hope we could set things right. But in the same breath, I wondered, what if there were even more secrets waiting to surface? A bailiff's voice cuts through the thick hush, and everyone stands as Judge Mendez enters, skirts rustling, leather shoes echoing against the polished floor. I grip the pew in front of me. My thumb presses so hard against the varnish it aches. My heart thuds and a faint, coppery taste sits at the back of my tongue. Behind me, Whispered arguments flicker from my aunt to my brother, sharp as broken glass. The attorney for the estate shuffles his papers, and I catch the tremor in his hands. The air in the room is stale, heavy with Chanel No. 5 and old grief. When the judge glances over her glasses, her brown eyes snag briefly on mine. My pulse trips. She looks tired, not angry, which unsettles me more. Her voice is low, almost gentle, as she asks for the first statement. My brother stands, voice flat but tight. We believe the previous will was genuine. We were with her the week before. His shoulder grazes mine as he sits, and I feel the heat of his resentment. I glance away, throat so dry it hurts to swallow. The lawyer for the new will, a stranger, young, tie askew, smiles. The decedent made her wishes clear in her final days. His words are oil on water, smooth but unconvincing. I sense the room shifting, people recalibrating. Testimonies begin. A nurse, then the notary, then the neighbor with her unreliable memory. Each story contradicts the last, timelines blur, intentions tangle. My hands sweat against each other as I try to follow, searching for something solid. In the judge's brief sigh, I hear the possibility that none of us will leave here with what we want. My brother leans close, voice just a breath. Did you see Mom sign anything? Really? I shake my head, memory folding in on itself. I wish I could say yes. I can't tell if we're winning or losing, only that something irreversible is happening. Something none of us can stop now. Marta, the caregiver, is called next. She walks to the stand in her sensible shoes, hair pulled back, gaze steady but guarded. The lawyer asks her about the weeks before my mother died. Her accent is thicker when she's nervous. She says, Mrs. Bishop wanted to change things. She was disappointed in her family. Her words hang in the air, pointed, and my brother's fingers dig into his thigh. The opposing lawyer presses, did Marta suggest anything? Did she help arrange the new will? Marta's eyes flick to me for the briefest moment. No, I only listened. But then the nurse's testimony is recalled. She falters, glancing at her hands. Marta was always there. She sometimes spoke for Mrs. Bishop, even when she was tired. Sometimes she discouraged visitors. A flush creeps up Marta's neck. I hear a hiss of breath from my sister. I think of all the mornings we were told not to come, that Mom was resting. How easily we'd accepted it. The judge asks, were you ever left alone with the decedent for prolonged periods? Marta nods. Every night. The implication lands with a cold finality in my gut. It feels like a puzzle snapping together, but the picture is wrong. Betrayal aches sharp and sudden, cutting through numbness. My mother's trust, our distance, all of it suddenly suspect. My sister's voice is barely more than a whisper. We let her have too much power. I can't even meet her eyes. All I can think is, what else did we miss? As testimony winds down, I'm left with a sick certainty that the line between caretaker and family was blurred in ways we never saw coming. During the lunch recess, we gather in the hallway, an accidental huddle. My brother paces, shoes squeaking against the linoleum. We should have visited more, he mutters. His voice is brittle, almost angry. I stare at the vending machine's blinking lights, stomach churning. My sister stands rigid, arms crossed. She wouldn't have changed the will if we'd been there. Her eyes are shiny, rimmed red. For a moment, I think she'll cry, but she just stares at the floor. I realize I don't know how to comfort either of them. Guilt prickles along my skin, remembering the calls I ignored, the holidays I missed. I remember telling myself there was time. My brother stops in front of me, jaw working. I thought leaving was the right thing. Letting her live how she wanted. There's accusation in his voice, and behind it, something softer, almost pleading. I want to say it wasn't just us, that illness changes people, but the words stick in my throat. All I can think is, what if she really did intend to cut us out, piece by piece, for every time we turned away? My sister finally looks up. It's too late, isn't it? She doesn't wait for an answer. She already knows. I lean against the cold cinderblock wall, feeling smaller than I have in years, wishing I could go back and do any of it differently. The afternoon session is brief. The lawyers call us aside, voices lowered, as the judge deliberates. You could challenge the will, Ars says. It's risky. You could end up with nothing. My brother's hands clench. We already have nothing, he says quietly. There's a silence, heavy and close. My sister's face has gone blank, the way she looks when she can't bear another loss. I wait for someone to argue, to throw something, to refuse, but no one does. The attorney says, a settlement is possible. Shared assets, but less than either will. We look at each other, 3 corners of a broken triangle, no center. I try to imagine walking away, accepting a compromise that tastes like failure. But what else is there? Another year of court, more anger, more distance? My brother finally says, I can't fight anymore. His voice is so low I almost miss it. There's no victory here, only exhaustion. In the hush, I want to reach for their hands, but I don't. The air feels brittle, like the wrong word could shatter us for good. We'll settle, I hear myself say. The word feels like surrender. The judge returns, robe catching the light, eyes scanning our faces. I think about the house on Elm Street, the garden Mom loved, the smell of cut grass after rain. None of it feels like it belongs to us anymore. As the judge speaks, voice even and final, something loosens inside me. Like a knot pulled slowly free, leaving only a dull ache. I glance sideways at my siblings, searching for the person I used to be, for the family we were before all this. Then the judge pauses, her eyes flicking to the paperwork in her hand. There's a document here I haven't seen before, she says, her voice sharper now. A murmur moves through the room. My heart stutters. I don't dare breathe as she unfolds a single page, glancing up at us. Something new is coming, a secret none of us were prepared for. When the house finally emptied and the echo of arguments faded, I sat on the edge of Mom's old bed, sunlight catching on the dust she always hated. Sarah stood in the hallway, her shoulders drawn tight, arms folded like she was holding herself together. The will, both versions, lay on the nightstand, their edges curled from too many hands. My head throbbed with a quiet ache, my jaw sore from grinding through all the things we'd said, and more from what we hadn't. I watched Sarah trace her finger along the doorframe, pausing where the paint had chipped. The silence between us was thick, heavier than anger. My throat felt raw, words stuck behind teeth. I wanted to ask if we'd ever be the same, but the question seemed too fragile. Instead, I said, "You okay?" My voice barely carried, thin and tired. She took a breath that shuddered in her chest. "I don't know." She looked at me, her eyes rimmed red, somewhere between resentment and longing. "But I don't want to fight anymore." That landed sharp, and for a second I let myself believe we could find something left, even if it was just this uneasy peace. The bed creaked as I shifted, wishing she'd sit beside me, but she just lingered in the doorway, both of us caught in the middle. A week later, the house was emptier still. Sarah had flown home, David stopped returning calls. I boxed up Mom's keepsakes, hands trembling over each photo and old letter. The sun fell low, catching gold on the kitchen tiles. I realized the ache in my chest was softer, a bruise instead of a wound. I dialed Sarah, listened to her voicemail, and left. I found the recipe cards. Maybe we could make that cake together sometime. Hanging up, I waited, pulse slow but steady. I pressed my palm to the table, feeling its familiar grooves. For the first time, I thought maybe the missing pieces could stay missing, and we'd still go on. But when I opened the back door, a gust of cold air carried the faint scent of her perfume, unexpected, sharp, like a question still waiting for its answer. The slam of the car door echoed across the empty driveway. The realtor's heels clicked up the path as she handed over a stack of final documents, her perfume sharp in the late morning air. My palm pressed flat against the porch rail. Its wood was warm, scuffed, the paint flaking in a way that caught on my sweater. I looked at the windows, still smudged with my mother's fingerprints, and tried to imagine someone else's lamp glowing on the other side. A sharp breeze carried the smell of cut grass, and my brother's cough rattled behind me. He shuffled from foot to foot, hands deep in his jacket. "We could still change our minds," he said, voice thin, almost swallowed by the creak of the mailbox. My heart stuttered, my throat dry. I wanted to say yes. We could walk away, we could keep these rooms stuck in amber. But the word wouldn't come. Instead, I nodded, feeling something unspool in my chest, both painful and hollow. I picked at a splinter with my thumb, watching the realtor's impatient smile. It struck me then how final this was. The legal language on those pages, the way my brother wouldn't meet my eyes. I almost laughed at myself for thinking that handing over a house key could ever be simple. A life folded into cardboard boxes, the walls heavy with old secrets. He cleared his throat again. "You ready?" he asked. I stared at him. Some part of me waited for a last-minute confession, for him to say he'd found another envelope, that none of this was needed. But all I heard was the wind whistling beneath the eaves. I wanted to ask him if he'd ever truly believed her, or if we both just played along in the hope of one good memory. I pushed the key toward the realtor, my fingers shaking. "Yeah, I'm ready." The lock clicked for the last time behind me, like the lid of a box sealing shut. I looked at my brother on the steps, his jaw set, eyes rimmed red. He wouldn't look at me, not really. For a moment, I wondered who we were now, without this place tying us together. Then I realized, maybe we were just two people, holding the same ache, but carrying it alone. We drove in silence, the house shrinking in the rear view until it became just another roof above the trees. My brother's hand hovered near the window crank, then dropped. I watched the shape of his profile reflected in the glass, and for a second, I wanted to reach out, to ask if he hated me for letting go, or if he needed me to hate him. But my mouth stayed closed. The highway hummed beneath the tires, a steady, unbroken line. Clouds pressed low over the fields. I remembered my mother's laugh, sudden and wild after a summer storm, her fingers in the flour, the way she used to tuck strands of hair behind my ear. The ache twisted sharper, but softer too, like a bruise I could press but not break. At a gas station, my brother finally spoke. "We did what we could," he said, voice cracking. His words landed somewhere between apology and dismissal. I turned away, pretending to watch a sparrow dart through the puddles. My chest felt lighter and heavier all at once, as if forgiveness was just a thing that happened quietly, when no one was brave enough to say it out loud. I pulled out my phone, scrolling past old photos, birthday cakes, a crooked Christmas tree in this house we'd just given away. The urge to call someone, her, maybe, or even him, rose and faded like a wave. In its place, a question I couldn't answer. What now? We got back on the road. I listened to the rhythm of his breathing, steady, almost tentative. The landscape blurred past, all possibility and uncertainty. Something inside me shifted. Maybe letting go wasn't the same as losing. Maybe this was the only way to keep the parts that mattered. At the next crossroads, his voice was soft, almost hopeful. "Want to stop somewhere? Get coffee?" I hesitated, feeling the tiniest flicker of relief. "Yeah, I'd like that." We turned off, headlights casting long shadows across an unfamiliar lot. I stepped into the thin, cold sunlight, realizing for the first time how much of the past could fit into a single, ordinary morning, and how much was still waiting, just ahead. The official chart didn't match what I remembered from Dad's diagnosis. My fingers stuck to the vinyl arm of the waiting room chair as I flipped the manila folder open, the pages curling at the edges like they'd been handled too many times. It was already after midnight, but the hallway buzzed with voices and the sharp squeal of a gurney's wheels. Dad was somewhere behind those sliding doors, his breath coming in uneven gulps when they wheeled him past, and now the space around me felt thin, stretched, like the building itself was holding its breath. A nurse swept past, her sneakers scuffing the linoleum. The air smelled like bleach and something sour underneath. I pressed a hand to my chest, tracking my own heartbeat, too fast, while the nurses barked orders down the corridor, never quite looking anyone in the eye. The fluorescent lights overhead pulsed, making everything seem a little off, like waking up in the wrong house. Mom sat 2 chairs away, one ankle crossed over the other, her knuckles wide around the handle of her purse. She didn't say much. She'd kept it together in the car, but now her lips were pressed tight, eyes fixed on the "no cell phones" sign above the reception desk. I tried to catch her eye, just to show her I was still there, but she didn't move. A doctor appeared at the far end of the hallway, scrub top wrinkled, talking quietly with another nurse. He glanced over at us, eyes skimming past like we were part of the furniture. I kept listening for Dad's voice or a cough, anything, but only the announcement system answered, crackling out a code I couldn't understand. I kept thinking, if I just concentrated hard enough, maybe I could will the next thing to happen a little faster. Every minute stretched further. I reminded myself to breathe, but my lungs felt stuck. The hospital had an energy like everyone was running late, and whatever was happening to Dad, we were already behind. The doctor finally called my name, and we shuffled down the hallway as a family, our shoes squeaking. He gestured us toward a cramped consult room with faded anatomical posters taped to the wall. He started talking before we even sat. "We're moving forward with the aggressive protocol," he said, flipping through a tablet, not looking up. "We need to get ahead of this, given the presentation." I ran a fingernail along the seam of my jeans, trying not to stare at the way his jaw clenched between sentences. Mom cleared her throat, voice barely above a whisper. What does that mean? What's the diagnosis? The doctor's eyes darted sideways. It's a complex case. We're still waiting on some labs. But we want to be proactive. Time is important. Something prickled up my neck. The words felt rehearsed, like he'd said them 100 times today. My memory flashed back to Dad's first appointment, the gentle way his primary care doctor explained everything step by step. This was nothing like that. Mom asked, "Is it the pneumonia again, or something else?" Her voice wavered, but she forced it steady at the end. The doctor's answer was clipped. "It's presenting differently. I'll have more information soon." I tasted copper, the bite of adrenaline in the back of my throat. He was moving too fast, evading. My hands curled tight in my lap, but I didn't say anything. "Not yet." He stood, already halfway out the door. "A nurse will update you." The door clicked behind him, leaving us in the hush of the little room. I could hear my own pulse, counting out the seconds. I looked at Mom, searching her face for answers. She shook her head, eyes wide, and I caught the briefest tremble in her chin. I wanted to chase after the doctor, to force him to look me in the eye and tell me what was actually going on, but my feet wouldn't move. We sat in silence, stiff and uncertain, as the hospital clock ticked somewhere behind the wall. A nurse poked her head in then, smile brittle. "We're following protocol, so just sit tight. Let us do our work." I stood, my chair scraping back. "Can someone explain what protocol means in this case? What exactly are you doing for him?" She blinked, adjusting her badge. "It's the same aggressive treatment we always use for respiratory presentations this severe. It's all in the chart. The team will update you." I started, but she was already gone, the door swinging shut behind her. My voice bounced back at me, too loud in the small room. Mom rubbed her temples, muttering. "They always have an answer, but it never means anything." The frustration tightened in my chest. I wanted to throw something, break the bland calm of that stupid room. I wanted someone to admit they didn't know what they were doing. Instead I sat, digging my nails into my palm, staring at the same diagram of lungs I'd seen in every doctor's office since I was a kid. The seconds dripped by like cold water down my collar. Another nurse passed. This time I followed, slipping out of the room and padding down the hallway. I found an unattended cart near the nurse's station, Dad's chart sitting on top, the spine creased and split. No one looked my way. I flipped the cover open. The first page was an admission note, date stamped 2 hours earlier than when we arrived. My heart stumbled. Was that a mistake? I checked the medication list. There were 3 drugs listed I'd never heard of, and a dose of steroids that didn't match what Dad's primary had prescribed last month. Someone coughed nearby. I snapped the chart closed, pulse hammering. There was a progress note signed by a doctor I didn't recognize. The handwriting was neat, the words precise, but under past medical history, there was no mention of Dad's arrhythmia, just a vague reference to cardiac concern. The dates felt slippery, off by a day here, an hour there. I scanned for Dad's primary doctor's name, but it was missing completely. The air felt thin around me. I waited for the sound of someone calling out, for someone to demand what I was doing. But the hallway stayed busy, everyone moving too fast to notice. I pressed my palm flat against the folder, willing the paper to steady my shaking hand. Something was wrong, and it was buried right here, in these pages, in what was missing, in the way everyone kept talking past us. I tucked the chart back onto the cart, heart pounding, and forced myself not to look over my shoulder as I walked back toward Dad's room. A cold certainty was settling in the pit of my stomach. I needed to know who was changing the story, and why. The elevator doors stuttered open with a metallic groan, and I stepped out into the fluorescent hallway, the soles of my sneakers catching on the scuffed linoleum. I spotted Dr. Lin, the resident with the tired eyes, by the nurse's station, scrolling quickly on her phone. My chest tightened. I forced myself forward, pulse thumping in my neck. "Excuse me, Dr. Lin. Could I talk to you about my dad's chart?" She startled, lowering her phone, gaze flicking up at the security camera above us. For a second, I thought she'd brush past, but she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and murmured, "Not here." The way her voice dropped, almost imperceptible, made my skin prickle. I followed her to a side alcove, barely big enough for the two of us. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and old coffee. She kept her back to the wall, arms folded tight. I showed her my printout, the official chart, timeline off, numbers scrubbed clean. Why are these different from what I saw last week? The scan dates, Dad's kidney function. Dr. Lynn's jaw tensed. Look, I can't, there are protocols. Sometimes things change after reviews, she said, eyes darting down the hallway. My ears burned, but the chart changed after his diagnosis. That's not normal, is it? She exhaled sharply, voice barely audible. You need to stop asking. There's pressure from upstairs. It's not safe for you. Or for me. My throat went dry. I searched her face, trying to catch any flicker of reassurance, but there was only exhaustion and something close to fear. Before I could push further, she was already edging away. Don't, please. She slipped back toward the main hallway, leaving me pressed against the cold plaster, heart racing with indignation and something darker, like the ground was shifting beneath me. I pressed my palm to the wall to steady myself, but the warning hung in the air, bitter and unfinished. There was more to this, and I couldn't just walk away. I wandered back toward Dad's room, past the nurse's break room where the door was slightly ajar. The smell of instant soup drifted out, and I caught the low murmur of voices. One nurse I recognized, Alicia, with the gentle voice, was standing at the counter, writing something on a notepad. She glanced up, saw me hovering. You all right? She asked, voice soft but with an edge that made me pause. I tried to arrange my face into something normal. I'm worried about my dad. About how things changed so fast on his chart. Did something new happen? She hesitated, fiddling with the hem of her scrub top, eyes darting to the clock like she was calculating how much she could risk saying. There's been new policies, she whispered, barely moving her lips. They want cases cleared fast. Sometimes treatments are pushed or delayed. A ripple of unease ran down my spine. But isn't that dangerous? Alicia's hand stilled. Her gaze met mine, unblinking. I'm not supposed to talk about it. But lately, we're all worried. Things slip through. People get hurt. My stomach flipped. I wanted to believe she was exaggerating, that it was just the usual hospital politics. But the way she kept her voice low, the way her hands shook ever so slightly, told me otherwise. Before I could ask more, her supervisor's voice echoed down the hall, sharp and impatient. Alicia gave me a tiny shake of her head and busied herself with a stack of patient files. I lingered by the vending machine, watching her disappear into the back room, her words looping in my mind. If policy changes were making care riskier, what had happened to Dad wasn't just bad luck. I found an empty chair in the family lounge and opened my laptop, the plastic keys cold under my fingers. My heart beat insistently in my ears as I logged into the hospital's portal, using Dad's patient code. The screen flickered, lines of records scrolling past, labs, imaging, progress notes. I went straight to the day he was admitted. I remembered the numbers from before. Creatinine high, but not critical. But now? The test result had a different value, a lower one, timestamped after the nephrologist had already recommended dialysis. I clicked details, last modified, 2 days ago. My breath caught. I checked another result. Blood pressure charted as stable, but I remembered alarms blaring, nurses rushing in. The audit log showed edits, a string of initials I didn't recognize. My vision narrowed. I scrolled further, finding a scan report that had been re-uploaded after treatment decisions were logged. Each time, the changes made it look like Dad's condition had been less severe. As if the records were rewritten to justify waiting. A cold sweat prickled on my neck. My hands shook as I took screenshots, afraid the window would vanish. It wasn't just a typo or a clerical error. Someone was actively changing Dad's history. I leaned back, pulse hammering, trying to make sense of it. How many other patients had their timelines rewritten? And why? A door clicked nearby, jolting me upright. A different nurse poked her head in, startled to see me glued to the screen. I slammed the laptop shut, heart pounding. I stood up, forcing air into my lungs. I needed to keep looking, to understand how deep this went. But suddenly, when I tried to log back in, a red warning banner flashed. Access denied. Please contact administration. My fingers hovered uselessly over the keyboard. I re-entered Dad's info, twice, 3 times. Locked out. A heavy silence pressed against my temples. I looked around, but the lounge was empty, save for a janitor quietly sweeping in the corner. The helplessness rose in my throat, thick and hot. Someone knew I was looking. Someone had cut me off. I wanted to scream, to run down the hall and demand answers. But all I could do was sit there, caged by the glow of the locked screen. wondering just how far they would go to keep me out. Somewhere down the corridor, footsteps echoed, quick and purposeful, drawing closer. A dull, official voice crackled through the phone. "I'm sorry, we can't give you that information without proper authorization." My hand tightened on the receiver. A clock on the wall ticked, far too loud. I pressed 2 fingers to my temple, trying to hold back a headache that had crept in somewhere between the last "no" and the one before. The administrator's words echoed, sterile and unwavering, behind the glass wall of protocol. It was the 3rd time today I'd been told about HIPAA, another faceless roadblock. My pulse thudded, matching the clock's mechanical beat, threatening to drown out reason itself. Somewhere under the irritation, something harder dug in. I recognized it. The first real shot of determination since Dad's chart hadn't lined up. They wanted me to give up. I felt the pressure, but beneath it, a stubborn energy, not yet anger, but close. I pictured the chart, the neat black lines, the erased symptoms. I took a long breath, cool air stinging my nostrils. "Is there a supervisor I can speak to?" There was a pause, then a tired sigh. "I'll see if someone's available." That "if" hung in the air, deliberate and slippery. Their voices all started to blur together, a chorus of practiced neutrality. Nothing personal, just policy. But the more they hid behind forms and passwords, the more convinced I became. This wasn't just red tape. This was a wall built for defense. I hung up, staring at my notes. The names, the dates, the perfect little check marks beside words that didn't match the memories in my bones. I didn't know how I'd get through, but I wasn't about to stop pressing. Later, in the humming hallway near the nurse's station, I caught sight of Lena, the one who'd whispered that Dad hadn't seemed right after his procedure. Her eyes flicked away the second I approached. "Lena, can I talk to you for a second?" I kept my voice gentle, almost apologetic. She adjusted her badge, glancing at the security camera in the corner. I'm on break." Her voice was smaller than I remembered, the usual warmth replaced with brittle caution. I leaned in, lowering my voice. "It's about my dad. That day." She half turned, forced a smile, but her lips barely moved. "I'm sorry, I can't." "Really?" There was a tremor there, not quite fear, but something close. My chest tightened. Her shift in posture, shoulders hunched, eyes darting, was more revealing than if she'd confessed outright. I noticed another nurse watching from the desk, face unreadable. A flicker of something cold moved through me. They were watching each other, they were watching me. That realization hovered, sharp and unwelcome. I started to wonder how many people had been told to keep their mouths shut. I tried 2 more staff. One brushed past me, muttering, "Not supposed to talk about cases." Another, who'd smiled at me last week, only shrugged. "Everyone's just doing their job," she said, and her voice was flat, resigned. The sense of being monitored pressed closer. I felt suddenly exposed, as if my every word might trigger some silent alarm. I walked away, my footsteps swallowed by the linoleum. These people were scared of something bigger than me. The way their eyes kept shifting, never quite meeting mine, I started to feel the prickle of paranoia at the base of my skull. Someone had made sure no one could talk. A storm was drumming in my ears as I sat in my car, hands trembling slightly with adrenaline. I couldn't get Lena's scared whisper out of my head. I pulled out my phone and started searching the hospital's finances on a whim, digging through old press releases and meeting notes. One link led to another, then an internal newsletter. Excellence Incentive Program. Recognizing progress through patient outcomes, it read, with a photo of the smiling hospital administrator. A quote below. "We're proud of our team. Our bonuses reflect measurable patient improvement." I stared at the words, a cold spark igniting beneath my sternum. Improvement. As if healing could be bought or faked. I scrolled further. Metrics everywhere, with little colored bars and happy-sounding labels. Bonuses for increased discharge rates. More for lower readmission. My breathing turned shallow. It wasn't about care. It was about numbers. My fingers shook as I screenshotted everything. A memory twisted in my gut. Dad's doctor, eyes averted, telling us about routine progress. I wanted to throw my phone. Instead, I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. If they were fudging charts for money, it wasn't just Dad. It was anyone they could erase behind a statistic. The urge to confront someone surged, acid hot. But I knew I had to be careful, or they'd shut me out for good. The anger didn't fade this time. It just settled deeper, rooting itself somewhere I couldn't shake. That night, the house was quieter than usual. The TV murmured in the living room, but nobody was really watching. I found Mom in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a mug, eyes raw. She didn't look at me when she spoke. "Your sister thinks you're going to make things worse." A hollow feeling opened in my chest. I tried to speak, but she shook her head. "He's tired, honey." "I'm tired. We just want to focus on him." I glanced at the hallway, where Dad's soft cough echoed from the bedroom. His favorite blanket, blue and frayed, lay folded on the end of the couch. It hit me how small he'd gotten in the past few weeks. I sat down, the chair scraping too loudly against the tile. My hands felt useless, heavy. "I don't want to fight," I said, the words barely more than a whisper. "But I can't let this go." Mom's eyes glistened, full of a grief bigger than either of us. "I know," she said, voice breaking. "But we have to survive this, not win." The weight of everything, Dad's health, my family's fear, my own gnawing doubt, settled like a stone in my stomach. For a moment, I wondered if I was really helping anyone at all. I left the kitchen, moving quietly past the closed door to Dad's room, careful not to wake him. His breathing was slow, uneven. I leaned my forehead against the wall, willing some answer to come to me. None did. The silence felt like a verdict I couldn't appeal. My phone buzzed just past midnight, a blocked number. My heart lurched as I answered. A voice, low and tense. "Check recent admissions. Look for changes in patients with dementia or no family visiting. Charts are switched when they're alone. Someone's covering their tracks." I sat upright, every nerve awake now, the room's darkness sharpening the edges of every sound. I scribbled the words down, hands suddenly steady. This was more than Dad. This was a pattern. The line went dead. For a second, I stared at the phone, the blood in my ears roaring. A chill slid down my spine. If they'd done this before, there had to be records. There had to be names. I pulled up the patient database, heart racing. Each click felt like trespass, but I couldn't stop. Redacted names, gaps in dates, notations that didn't add up, details I would have missed before the call. It was all too deliberate, too careful. A bead of sweat rolled down my temple as I realized. This wasn't just about money or pride. This was systematic. My mouth went dry. I scrolled faster, aware that every minute I spent digging was a minute closer to someone noticing. The next day, I slipped back into the hospital, nerves jangling. I told myself I was just visiting Dad, but my eyes kept darting to the nurse's station, the files stacked behind the glass. Somewhere on those pages, I knew, was proof. Maybe enough to finally break the wall. I had the sense that someone was watching. But for the first time, that fear sharpened into something else, a grim clarity. I wasn't alone in this. Not anymore. Everything was about to change. The admin's office was cold, fluorescent light humming, the smell of antiseptic heavy in the air. I sat across from Ms. Drummond, the director, my copy of Dad's chart open between us, the same pages I'd poured over the night before, now marked with sticky notes, discrepancies circled in red. She tapped the edge of the folder, her eyes flat. "These are just corrections," she said, voice so even it almost felt rehearsed. My hands shook, so I pressed my palms to my knees. "That's not what the record said last month. The medication dosage, Dad never took that much insulin. And the dates, look, it's been changed. Someone went back and edited this." She didn't blink. Medical records are updated all the time. Sometimes a nurse enters data late. There's no malice. Her tone was as smooth as a locked door, but under the surface, I caught the tightness in her jaw, a flicker of something sour and defensive. A pulse thundered behind my ears. I wanted to grab her by the shoulders and make her see how obvious it was. The handwriting, the time stamps, the things they'd erased. "I'm not stupid. You can't just rewrite what happened to my dad." Drummond's lips thinned. "You're upset. I understand. But unless you have something concrete, these are just misunderstandings. Please don't stir up panic." A hollowness opened up in my chest. I'd come in expecting resistance, but not this. Not dismissal so complete it felt personal. She slid the folder back to me, her voice softening only for the last word. "For your own good, let this go." I stood, heartbeat uneven, the chart burning in my hand. There was no apology, only a warning she wanted me to hear. As I walked out, I wondered if I was the only one who'd noticed, or just the only one stubborn enough not to look away. That afternoon, I found an envelope tucked beneath Dad's pillow, no return address, my name scribbled on the front. The paper inside was thick, legal, hospital letterhead, a settlement offer spelled out in bureaucratic language. Money, more comfortable care for Dad, all in exchange for my confidentiality. My mouth went dry. I stared at Dad, his breath slow and shallow, eyelids fluttering in the sunlit room. They want me to sign something, I said. Not talk about what happened. He didn't answer. I'm not even sure if he heard me. I read the words again, the promise of new amenities and private nurses, the subtext loud as sirens. Keep quiet, keep him safe. My spine tingled with shame. I could sign, and Dad might get better food, a softer bed, attention when he pressed the call button. But everything inside me recoiled at the quiet threat in the letter. If I refused, would they punish him? Would I lose the only leverage we had? I sank onto the edge of the mattress, fingers tingling. Dad's chart sat in my lap, the altered lines staring back. What do I do? I whispered, but the only answer was the hiss of oxygen and the slow tick of the clock. I wanted someone to tell me the right thing. But all I had was the sick certainty that whatever I chose, someone would be hurt. I folded the letter, heart heavy, and slipped it into my bag. Either way, something precious was about to break. The next day, the halls felt different, charged, watchful. Nurses walked together in whispers, eyes flicking toward me and away again. The cafeteria buzzed louder than usual, conversations cut short as I passed. Outside Dad's room, a group of older patients clustered by the window, their voices low and urgent. That's her, I heard one of them whisper. The one asking questions. My skin prickled. A nurse I'd known for months wouldn't meet my eyes as she passed a tray. On the community board in the lobby, someone had tacked up a flyer about patient safety, bolded and underlined, but it felt more like a threat than a reassurance. I pulled my phone from my pocket, hands clammy. Group texts pinged. One from a junior resident I'd met in the elevator, just a single word, careful. My mind churned with worst-case scenarios. Would they stop letting me see Dad? Would they start treating him differently? Every time I walked into a room, a hush followed. It was like the building itself pressed in on me, every corridor tighter, every conversation shadowed by fear. I caught a glimpse of Dr. Sheth at the end of the hall. His eyes lingered on me, apology written in the lines around his mouth, but he didn't stop. I couldn't tell if I was protecting Dad, or making things worse for everyone. That night, the house was quiet, except for the soft whir of the fridge and the ticking of the stove clock. Mom sat at the table, shoulders hunched, her tea untouched. My brother hovered by the window, arms folded tight. He spoke first, barely above a whisper. What did you do? I swallowed, throat rough. I found proof. They offered a deal, but only if I stayed quiet. Mom's voice trembled. Will Dad lose his place there? What if they stop caring for him? My chest tightened. I tried to explain, the altered chart, the settlement, the way people in the hospital looked at me now. But words tumbled out half-formed, choked by guilt. My brother's fists unclenched. You had to make this into a crusade? I looked at Mom, searching for comfort. Her eyes were rimmed red, but she held my gaze. We just want him safe. A wave of helplessness rolled through me. Had I made everything worse? Was it worth the risk, just to be right? The silence stretched, heavy and accusing. For the first time, I wondered if I'd crossed a line I couldn't come back from. The clock struck midnight, sudden and sharp. I stared at the altered chart on the table, and realized I didn't know which was heavier, the truth, or the cost of telling it. A heavy knock rattled the glass, followed by the flash of a news van's logo outside Dad's hospital window. I blinked, heart skittering as the nurse paused in the doorway, her eyes darting from me to the parking lot below. Down the corridor, a voice called for Ms. Ramsey, Channel 7, and doors began to shut, one after the other. I pressed my palm flat to the cool window, watching a cluster of reporters swarm the main entrance. My chest tightened. Something in the air felt electric, like the hospital itself was bracing. My phone buzzed, and I saw the notification. Whistleblower outrage at St. Joseph's, patient records under review. My breathing slowed, shallow and sharp. For a moment, I wasn't sure if I should laugh, cry, or just collapse. The chart, the late-night arguments, every bitter glance, out there now, undeniable. Vindication tasted sharp, almost metallic. The hospital was under investigation, staff suspended. I mouthed the words silently, letting them settle, not sure what came next. Dad's meal tray clattered as an orderly rushed past, and he looked up at me, confusion flickering in his eyes. The room smelled faintly of antiseptic and something sweeter, mango juice, untouched. I moved to adjust his blanket, hands shaking, nerves thrumming for reasons I could barely name. He reached for my wrist, gentle but firm. "You did this?" His voice was quieter than I'd expected. I nodded before I could talk myself out of it, throat tight. He didn't smile, just stared at me, his eyes older than I remembered. "Are we safe now?" he whispered. I swallowed, brushing hair from his forehead. The monitors hummed steady and slow, but all I could hear was my own pulse thrumming in my ears. "They're watching now. I think it's better." But the words felt thinner than I wanted. As I packed my bag, the room seemed smaller, the light harsher, like the truth had stripped everything bare. Dad's care improved, more attentive nurses, more careful notes. Still, each time a new doctor introduced herself, I watched Dad's hands twitch beneath the covers. At home, Mom moved quietly, glancing at the phone as if expecting more bad news. We talked less, voices softer, like the walls themselves were listening. I caught my own reflection in the hallway mirror, eyes rimmed red, shoulders set hard. The old kind of trust we'd all taken for granted, gone, hollowed out. One afternoon, Dad reached for my hand as I adjusted his pillow. "You did the right thing," he murmured, voice rough. But when I squeezed his fingers, I felt the distance that truth had made. Even now, weeks later, I still check the locks twice at night, still flinch when the phone rings after dinner. I keep the altered chart folded in my desk drawer, its corners worn soft from worry. Sometimes, in the quiet, I wonder how much deeper the cover-up really went, and if any of us will ever stop looking over our shoulders. A new badge hung outside the hospital entrance, shiny blue with white letters, "Patient Safety First." I caught my reflection in the glass as I walked in, face drawn, eyes ringed darker than I remembered. Inside, a cluster of staff in crisp scrubs gathered around a poster about transparency and process improvements. The administrator's voice carried, rehearsed and careful. "This is about trust," she said, nodding like she believed it. I felt the cold breeze from the entryway settle into my chest. My hands squeezed the strap of my bag, knuckles pale. Around us, the rhythm of hospital life didn't pause. Orderlies pushed gurneys, nurses murmured into phones. A faint chemical tang hung in the air. The chart in my bag pressed against my side, heavier than paper should be. The administrator caught my eye on her way past and offered a practiced smile. "We're grateful for your courage," she said, too loud, too public. My pulse skipped. I searched her face for something unscripted, a crack in the mask. But she was already turning, already talking about learning opportunities. I was supposed to feel proud, I think. Instead, I only felt exposed. A new sign outside the records office warned that all changes will be logged and reviewed. The woman behind the glass partition met my gaze warily as I handed her a request slip. "You know, it's all different now," she said, voice dipping to a whisper. "They say it can't happen again." She looked at me like she wanted reassurance, but all I could offer was a nod. I pressed my palm against my stomach to quiet the nauseous twist. Was this what change looked like? Posters, policies, a few nervous faces? I wanted to believe it was enough. But each cheerful slogan read like a dare. "Prove we're telling the truth this time." When the file slid back across the counter, the ring on her finger clicked against the plastic. I wondered if she'd ever let herself check what was missing. Walking back down the corridor, I couldn't shake the sense of being watched, by cameras, by curious staff, by the weight of a story everyone wanted to move on from. Maybe things would be better now. But the air still tasted faintly of bleach and secrets. The elevator chimed open on Dad's floor, and I blinked as fluorescent light spilled into the hall. His door was propped open with a battered foam wedge. I paused for a moment, listening for his voice, the soft rumble of the TV, any sign he was awake. There was only the low hum of the vent. I stepped inside. The room was filled with the thin winter sun, casting stripes across Dad's blanket. He was half asleep, skin washed out and slack. A plastic water cup sat untouched on the tray. I pulled up a chair, the legs scraping softly. His hand rested flat on the sheet, fingers curled in. I let my breath out slowly, feeling the ache in my shoulders. The fight had rearranged something inside me. A new vigilance, a brittle edge. I pressed my thumb to the altered chart, tucked out of sight in my pocket. I'd won something, I supposed. But the cost was written in the lines around Dad's mouth, the way he startled now when the door opened. He stirred and turned his head, eyes finding mine, wary at first, then softening. "You okay, honey?" His voice was gravelly, uncertain, as if he'd forgotten how to ask. I swallowed, words caught behind my teeth. I wanted to say it's over, you're safe. But the words wouldn't come. My chest tightened, heavy with the knowledge that safety here was only a promise, never a guarantee. He reached for my hand, squeezing weakly. I blinked back the sting in my eyes. "We did our best, didn't we?" he said, almost to himself. The radiator rattled under the window, and I watched the light crawl up the wall, thinking about everything I'd risked. I wondered, not for the first time, if I'd have the nerve to do it again. I waited for the answer, but all I heard was the faint beep of the IV, counting out the silence. The fluorescent lights in the made my eyes ache, turning everything sterile and a little too sharp. My name was called, the syllables clipped, the nurse's shoes squeaking against the polished floor as she led me behind the curtain. I couldn't stop clenching and unclenching my hands in my lap, trying to convince myself my heart wasn't about to leap out of my chest. The inside of my mouth tasted like old coins. I'd come in because I'd been coughing up blood, 2 mornings in a row now, bright red against the sink, impossible to ignore. The nurse's voice was gentle as she asked about allergies and medications, her hands cool against my skin as she found my pulse. The blood pressure cuff squeezed my arm tight. I tried to steady my breathing. My mind kept flipping through every worst-case scenario I'd ever read online. The nurse smiled, her voice low, like she thought she might scare me if she spoke any louder. "Dr. Patel will see you soon, okay?" she said, her hand brushing my shoulder for a second before she left. The curtain fluttered in her wake. I stared at the blueprint on my hospital gown, the fabric thin and scratchy. Every sound in the hallway seemed magnified, the clatter of a cart, a cough, someone laughing too loud. My fingers shook a little as I pulled the blanket higher, the latex of my ID wristband stretching over my skin. A different nurse came in next, this one brisk, efficient, sliding vials into a rack. She barely paused as she took my blood, her eyes scanning a computer screen over my head. I watched the deep red fill the tube and felt a hot, crawling need for it to mean nothing serious, something minor, something fixable. The test results would tell us. She nodded, almost to herself, and told me to rest. I closed my eyes, listening to the beeping of someone else's monitor nearby, trying to imagine a future where this was just a blip, a weird story I'd tell one day. But the air stayed heavy, my chest tight, my breath never quite filling my lungs. The curtain parted again. Dr. Patel stepped in, face open and calm, a clipboard tucked against his chest. He looked me in the eye, really looked, in that way that made everything else in the room fade out for a moment. "You're lucky you came in," he said, his voice even. "We have your blood work back, and your chest x-ray." He sat on the edge of the bed, the paper crinkling under him. "It looks like a nasty infection, not cancer, not anything unmanageable. Your white cell count is up, but nothing worrying." He turned the clipboard so I could see a line of numbers, black ink on white paper, all organized, and explained. He pointed to where the infection markers spiked. "A strong course of antibiotics. You'll stay overnight for observation, but we expect a full recovery." My vision blurred for a second. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding since this started. My whole body sagged against the pillow. It was just an infection, not the shadowed scenarios that had haunted me all week. I nodded, letting the numbers on the page anchor me. My mind already leaping ahead to discharge, to normalcy, to coffee in my own kitchen tomorrow. Dr. Patel smiled and handed the clipboard to the nurse who'd followed him in. "We'll get the IV started in a few minutes," he said, standing. "Any questions for me?" I shook my head, unable to find words beyond, "Thank you." He patted my foot through the blanket, then left, the nurse trailing behind. The room was quiet again, except for the hum of the air vent. The test sheet with my name on it stayed on the little table next to my bed. The relief came in waves and then faded, replaced by an odd little void. I texted my sister, a quick update, the facts in shaky sentences. She'd been waiting all day, her messages piling up. "Anything yet? Do you need anything? Please call when you know." I started typing back, but my fingers stalled. 5 minutes later, the curtain snapped open and she was there, still in her nurse scrubs from her own shift, hair in a messy bun. She didn't say anything at first, just sat on the edge of my bed, her hands folded tense in her lap. "You're sure they said infection?" she asked quietly, eyes searching mine. I showed her the test sheet, the doctor's notes. She read them twice, then 3 times, her brow furrowing. "Did they say what kind of infection? How long do you have to stay? Did you see your actual scans?" I shook my head. "Just what he told me. Antibiotics, overnight. That's it." She bit her lip, staring at the numbers. Okay, it makes sense, but can I ask them a couple questions? Just, for my peace of mind." A strange heat pulsed at the back of my neck. I nodded, grateful but embarrassed, as she stood and slipped out to the nurse's station. I lay back, staring up at the ceiling tiles, each one slightly off color, the pattern broken in the corner. I heard her low, urgent voice a few feet away, but couldn't make out the words. When she returned, her smile was forced, her hand on my arm colder than before. "They said the same thing. Just infection. I'll stay for a bit, okay?" "Yeah," I said, my voice too small. "Thanks." We sat in silence, the clock ticking on the wall, her phone lighting up every so often with messages she ignored. Her presence was a comfort, but under the surface, a trickle of worry kept running. When visiting hours were up, she squeezed my hand and promised to text if I needed her. I nodded, trying not to show how much I wanted her to stay. After she left, I lay in the hospital bed, staring at the glow of my phone screen. The antibiotics burned a little as they dripped into my IV. I texted her, "I'm okay. Promise. See you tomorrow." She replied immediately, "Don't be afraid to ask for anything. Or press the call button. Seriously." I sent a thumbs up emoji, but my chest still felt tight, the cold edge of uncertainty pressed against my ribs. The hallway outside was quieter now. The shift changed at midnight. A new nurse came in, younger, with tired eyes and a practiced smile. She checked my vitals without saying much, moving quickly in the half-dark. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I could hear something faint, muffled voices at the nurse's station, the click of computer keys, the soft beep of alarms further down the hall. My hand kept drifting toward the test sheet on the table, fingers tracing the edge of the paper. At 2 a.m., I woke to an unfamiliar voice outside my curtain, hushed and urgent. The nurse's footsteps faded, and then nothing. I stared at the ceiling, heart beating harder now, a single line of light slipping under the curtain from the hallway. My mind snagged on a single thought. What if something had changed? A sharp knock jolted me from my half-sleep. I was still in last night's clothes, slumped in a vinyl chair beside the bed, when the nurse stepped in, same one from yesterday, but her energy was different. She kept her eyes glued to the chart, not to me or to the window, just the paper. The room was shadowy with morning, the monitors still humming. She cleared her throat and handed me a sheet that looked almost identical to the original, except the numbers weren't as clear, the diagnosis column now a string of terms I didn't recognize. I scanned for that one word I'd been dreading, gone, replaced with something like pending analysis. My chest tightened. The air was thick and still, and I realized she hadn't said good morning or offered a smile, just this chilly silence. I tried to catch her gaze. "Is this a mistake? Yesterday you said," my voice snagged, too loud in the quiet. She shook her head, lips pressed thin. "It's the updated report. Any questions, ask your doctor." Her tone was flat, almost practiced. She pivoted, shoulders clenched, and left before I could follow up. I sat there, the page trembling at the edges where I gripped it, a rush of confusion making my head swim. I couldn't stop thinking about the change. Why now? Why so quietly? And why did it feel like something essential had just slipped out of reach? The hallway outside felt colder when I stepped out, test sheet clutched against my chest. I caught sight of the doctor, white coat and all, striding toward the nurse's station. I called out, "Dr. Patel, can we talk about these results?" My voice carried a note of urgency I didn't try to hide. He paused, eyes flicking from me to the open door, then back to the computer in front of him. "I have rounds," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Everything's in the file. We're following standard protocol." A nurse at the desk shot me a look, lips twitching as if she wanted to speak but couldn't. The light above the nurse's station flickered, a harsh buzz in the morning quiet. "Standard protocol for what? Our results changed overnight." He shook his head, shuffling papers. "There was a review. Sometimes results are amended for accuracy. It's nothing to worry about." But my words fizzled in the empty space between us. He turned away, disappearing into the corridor. The staff around him seemed to shrink a little, more intent on their screens, their conversations suddenly hushed. I leaned against the cool plaster wall, frustration coiling through me, wishing someone would just give a straight answer. I kept thinking, if there was nothing wrong, why did no one want to talk? Mom pressed her hand over mine, fingers icy. She'd been quiet all morning, but now her voice was steady, insistent. Let me see that. She took the lab report, squinting at the printed lines, tracing her finger down the rows. These dates don't match, she said quietly. Her brow furrowed, lips tightening as she compared the times. Yesterday's test suddenly time-stamped after midnight, the name of the technician different. My pulse tapped at my temples. What does that mean? She didn't look up. It means someone changed this after the fact. And no one saying why. The room seemed smaller, the air sharp. I thought about the nurse from this morning, how quickly she'd left, the way her hand had trembled slightly when she handed me the paper. It was like standing on a frozen lake, listening for cracks. Mom's voice broke through my thoughts, low and urgent. We need to talk to someone else. Someone above them. I nodded. The hospital suddenly felt bigger and stranger, like we were moving through a place that wasn't meant for us. Each step down the hall echoed with a kind of hollow warning. We found the floor administrator behind a glass door, sunlight bouncing off her silver badge. She listened, arms folded, as Mom explained the mismatched times and the shifting results. I slid the report across her desk, watching her eyes flick back and forth from the numbers to our faces. I appreciate you bringing this to my attention, she said, voice calm. Sometimes the system runs behind, or test results are revalidated manually. But I'll look into it personally. Please give me until this afternoon. The way she said it, deliberate, measured, as if she already knew the script, made my skin prickle. But for the first time all morning, I felt something solid under my feet, like maybe we'd finally forced this place to notice us. She smiled, just a flicker, and gathered the papers. I'll be in touch as soon as I learn more. We walked out, the door clicking shut behind us. I glanced down at my hands. They were still shaking, but now I wasn't sure if it was from adrenaline or something colder. All I could do was wait, listening for footsteps in the hallway, wondering what, looking into it, might actually reveal. My mom's voice echoed off the linoleum as she read the printout, her eyes darting between columns. Why is the potassium listed at 3.2 here, but 4.1 on yesterday's? She said, confusion tightening her jaw. My pulse picked up, a crawling energy at the base of my skull. I tried to focus, but the numbers blurred. The chart looked like it had been photocopied twice, the ink smudged in places. Dad hovered behind her, silent except for his uneven breaths. That shouldn't have been possible. The nurse had brought the results directly to me last night, but this new version, different values, and a timestamp from hours before I'd given blood. The prick of doubt sharpened as I flipped through the stapled papers, each sheet slightly out of order. Mom pressed her finger to a faint margin note. See addendum. The addendum page was missing. My skin felt cold, prickling with a sudden alertness I'd only felt once before, when I'd lost sight of my little brother at the mall. Dad leaned in, his voice low. Someone changed these. He didn't sound angry, more odd, unsettled, as if we'd just found a trapdoor in the floor. The silence pressed in, heavy with questions I wasn't sure I wanted answered. I caught myself holding my breath, listening for footsteps in the hall. If the records could change overnight, I wondered what else could disappear before morning. We pressed the call button. A different nurse arrived, the kind with a fixed smile and restless hands. Mom asked, could we get the complete chart, please? All the test results, including last night's? The nurse's smile flickered. She glanced down the hall, then at the paperwork clutched in Mom's hand. Something tense passed through her shoulders. I'll have to check with the charge nurse. It might take a while, she said, backing away before Mom could reply. A tightness twisted in my chest. In the hallway, I heard muffled voices, someone asking if the printer jammed again, a tired laugh in response. Dad followed her to the nurse's station, speaking quietly. After a pause, the nurse returned, holding a slim folder. She handed it to Mom but kept her grip on the edge for a second too long. This is what we have available at the moment, she said, not quite meeting our eyes. Inside were only select pages. The revised results, a summary, but none of the raw data or timestamps from earlier in the week. My fingers tingled as I flipped through the sheets. The absence was louder than any answer. We glanced at each other, all of us waiting for someone to say what we were thinking. Dad finally whispered, "What are they so worried we'll find?" A flat, metallic clang rang out from the hallway. A supply cart, maybe, or someone dropping a tray. I turned my head and caught a wave of hurried motion. Nurses in blue scrubs moving faster than usual, one muttering under his breath as he brushed past. Laughter, sharp and stressed, burst from behind the glass doors near the break room. The shift was changing. One nurse scribbled on a chart as another hovered by the computer, shaking her head. "I can't keep up, Morgan," she said. "We're behind by 2 hours." Morgan, shoulders hunched, gave a thin smile. Same as always. Her knuckles were white on the binder. Something about their faces, tired, guarded, made my throat tighten. It was easier to believe in malice than in exhaustion, but now I wasn't so sure. For a moment I pictured them, buried by forms, missing dinner with their kids, forgetting simple things. My anger faltered, replaced by a strange, aching sympathy. I wondered if any of them noticed the chart in my room, or if they were simply too busy to care. Mom's phone buzzed on the bedside table. She picked it up, brows furrowing as she scrolled through a photo she'd snapped earlier, the original report, the nurse's signature visible in the margin. "We need to find that nurse," she said, her voice wavering. I nodded, but a part of me hesitated. If the system was broken, blaming one exhausted person wouldn't fix it. Still, we needed answers. Dad rummaged through the stack of visitor passes on the tray, searching for anything we'd missed. In the mess of paperwork, a folded note slipped free, a corner marked with a red pen. He unfolded it, eyes widening. It was a shift schedule, but beneath the scribbles was a line that didn't fit. "Do not disturb, call after midnight. Only if test incomplete." The handwriting looked rushed, the ink smudged as if someone had written it with shaking hands. Mom squinted. Was this from the night nurse? The note was signed only with an initial, C. For a second, the three of us stared at it, the way you might examine a clue in a mystery novel. The clock on the wall ticked, slow and accusing. I heard the low hum of the air vent and the rattle of someone restocking a med cart outside. Every ordinary sound seemed charged, like the whole ward was holding a secret just out of reach. Dad broke the silence. She must have known something was wrong. His words hung in the air, heavy and uncertain. It felt like we'd stumbled onto a path, but the way forward was still hidden in shadow. Mom straightened, resolve settling over her features. She pressed the call button again, firmer this time. When the nurse arrived, Mom didn't wait. "We need to speak with the doctor. And the nurse who signed these reports. And someone from administration." The nurse hesitated, her eyes flicking to the chart in Mom's hand. "I'll let them know you're requesting a meeting," she said, carefully neutral. I could feel a pulse beating in my throat, a surge of nervous energy that made my hands tremble on the blanket. Dad gathered the paperwork, stacking it with more force than necessary. "Full transparency," he muttered, almost to himself. His gaze was steady now, but I could see the old fear in the way he gripped the folder. "We aren't leaving until we get real answers." The nurse nodded, her mouth set. "I'll bring them as soon as possible." I watched her go, the door swinging shut behind her. My heart thudded, equal parts dread and relief. For the first time since all this began, it felt like we were taking agency, not just waiting for someone else to change our story. But as the minutes ticked by and the hallway grew quiet again, I wondered what would happen if transparency came at a cost we hadn't imagined. The fluorescent lights buzzed, faint but insistent. I stared at the chart in my lap, wondering, if I turned the next page, would I finally see the truth, or just another carefully rewritten line? A door snapped shut somewhere down the hall, muffled but sharp, and I glanced up from the warped vinyl floor. The nurse manager appeared, eyes rimmed red, lab coat stiff at the shoulders. She paused, not at the foot of my bed, but halfway between my chart and me. My chest tightened. I wanted to ask where Anna was, or why no one had said her name since the results change, but my tongue held, dry and heavy. The manager clutched a thick folder, knuckles pale. She exhaled. "We need to talk about the test results." Her voice was small but clear. That phrase, so practiced, made my scalp prickle. I bit the inside of my cheek, tasting iron. I tried to sit up straighter, pushing through the fatigue in my arms, intent on hearing every word. She gripped the folder and lowered her eyes. "Your first test was correct. There was never any reason to change it." A tremor ran through her voice. Behind her, the fluorescent lights cast queasy shadows on the wall. A cold jolt ran through me. My mind spun. If the original result was real, then the second, the quiet correction, the way Anna vanished, none of it was random. I gripped the blanket tighter. She shuffled papers, her hands shaking. A technician noticed a discrepancy after midnight, and, out of caution, the night staff reissued the result. She swallowed. They didn't want trouble. I'm sorry. The word hung there, flat and useless. Something inside me recoiled, not from the apology itself, but from the idea of so many hands willing to erase a fact with a pen stroke. Suddenly, I wanted to see Anna's face. I wanted to know if she'd tried to stop it, or if she'd left because she couldn't bear to stay. I was left with her silence, and the sick certainty that trust here was a story that could be rewritten, too. The corner of a jacket rustled, and the hospital administrator stepped into the room, her badge swinging, eyes wary but practiced. She nodded at the nurse manager, who stepped aside, shrinking into the far corner. The admin drew a slow breath, hands folded, as if she rehearsed this act beneath the hum of every ward. "No one wanted to hurt you," she said. "Nothing about this was personal." Her gaze flicked to the chart, then my face. "The team's overwhelmed. We've lost 2 techs in as many weeks. Everyone's scared of being singled out." A distant beeping echoed from the hallway, sharp and out of place, and I realized I hadn't exhaled. My shoulders dropped, muscles aching. Her voice softened. "Mistakes are supposed to be reported. But sometimes, people worry about their jobs, not just their patients." The words came out low, like they'd been said before, somewhere behind a closed office door. I wanted to spit out something angry, anything, but my jaw ached from clenching. I was tired, so tired, but I couldn't stop listening. She leaned in, lowering her voice. "There are pressures here you can't see. It's not about you. It's about how this place runs when no one's watching." I felt the weight behind her words, the way the staff in the next room moved quietly, heads down, as if hoping to stay invisible. A thin thread of understanding curled through my chest, cold but real. I still wanted someone to blame. A cart rattled past the doorway, wheels squeaking, and I heard a quiet cough from the hallway. I looked at the nurse manager, her face hollow, eyes shining, and I wondered if she'd slept. I studied her, the lines in her forehead, the faint smudge beneath one eye. She looked nothing like the person who dropped the test results into my lap yesterday, confident and brisk. Now, she seemed smaller. Worn down. My pulse thumped in my ears. "What about Anna?" My voice caught. She just disappeared. The manager's lips parted, then closed, like she was swallowing words. She's on administrative leave." Her voice was almost a whisper. She didn't want to be part of this. A cold ache settled in my chest. I wanted to scream, to cry, to demand why their problems had landed here, in my vein, in my chart, in my room. Instead, I just watched the clock tick, the hand stuttering forward. I looked from the admin to the manager, waiting for anger to flare, but nothing came. Just the heavy, sour taste of disappointment. They stood there, silent, the air crowded with everything they couldn't say. My throat felt raw. I thought of every time I'd trusted a doctor's word, every signature I'd given, every polite lie they'd told to keep the world running smoothly. The hospital, I realized, was just a collection of tired people doing their best not to collapse. But it was still my life, my body, my file. The admin shifted her weight. "We can file a report. You can speak to the board. Or, we can look forward. It's your choice." Her eyes tried to meet mine, searching for something, permission, maybe, or forgiveness. The air in the room tightened, then thinned. I rubbed my arms, tracing the pinch of the IV tape on my skin. I wanted to yell, to demand that heads roll, but the exhaustion was a lead weight pressing me down. I wanted an apology to mean something, but I also wanted the truth to matter more than someone's mistake. The manager spoke, voice fragile. "We're sorry. Genuinely. We want you to get better. We should have done better." Her words made my chest twist. I wondered, was healing even possible if I always had to second-guess the hands that offered help? The room went quiet. The only sound the distant chatter of nurses at the station, the thud of my own heart in my ears. If I filed a complaint, the staff could lose their jobs. Maybe Anna would never come back. Maybe none of it would fix what had already happened. If I accepted their apology, if I just let it go, would I always wonder if someone else would pay the price for my silence? The admin watched me, eyes steady, But there was something tired beneath the surface, as if she'd heard this question before and never found the right answer. I stared at the mess of forms on my tray, at the revised test sheet, at the lines that decided so much with so little effort. My hands shook. For a moment, the choice hovered, sharp, unforgiving. Either path meant losing something. My faith in the system, or my hope that it might someday get better. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, coming closer, too steady to be ignored. I realized that whatever I chose, the world outside this room would keep moving, indifferent to the ink on my chart or the ache in my chest. I drew in a slow breath, not sure if I was ready to speak. My answer was still forming, fragile as a thread, but I knew it would change more than just the story written in my records. The conference room hums with the low, artificial buzz of the ceiling lights. I watch my own hands tremble slightly as I press print on the document, my timeline, my notes, copies of the original test sheet and the revised one. The pages come out warm, faint ink smell curling up. Somewhere down the hall, a metal cart rattles past, but I keep my back to the door. My heart beats heavy, a dull ache behind my ribs, as I hand the stack to the review board. Their faces are unreadable, some tired, some wary, one woman nodding minutely when I meet her eyes. I want to stand taller but my legs feel hollow. Someone clears their throat. "We appreciate your honesty," they say, voice low, almost careful. I sense the power shifting, something unspoken beginning to tilt. My mouth is dry, but I nod. The stakes feel larger than me now. Someone else will decide what matters, but I've set it down. I walk out lighter than I walked in, but behind my eyes, there's a burning I can't quite name. Weeks later, the hospital air feels different, less oppressive. The nurse's station smells of coffee. I spot her, Elena, organizing a tray, her posture careful, eyes darting up when she sees me. I hesitate, pulse skipping, then step forward. The words nearly catch in my throat. "Thank you for everything you did. I know it wasn't easy." She drops her gaze, fiddling with the edge of a folder, then looks up. "You made it matter," she says, voice almost steady. The silence between us is full and strange, but not heavy. I see the exhaustion in her face, but also something like relief. We're both changed, marked by what happened, but not ruined. I walk away knowing the system can fail, but people don't always have to. Still, I wonder how many times this story goes untold. The email from the hospital lands with a strange echo, a clinical update wrapped in careful language. New checks and balances, procedures revised, mandatory sign-offs. My eyes catch on phrases like data integrity and transparent communication, and for a second, the memory of that revised test sheet burns brighter. How it felt in my hand, heavier than paper had any right to be. I scroll down, skimming the bullet points, pulse ticking in my throat. This is good, I think. Progress. But I can't stop picturing the nurse's silence, the way she wouldn't meet my eyes in the corridor. My hands tighten around the edge of the kitchen table. They're fixing the system, but what about the people caught in it? A week later, I find myself in a room of strangers, the folding chairs squeaking under shifting weight. Patient advocates, some with clipped voices, others trembling with the rage of old wounds. A man at the front asks, "Why are you here?" And my answer bobs up, unsteady, before I even know I've spoken. Because I want to make sure this never happens again. There's a ripple of nods, a murmur that settles over the group. Someone passes a stack of forms down the row. The fluorescent lighting buzzes faintly overhead. It's not the same as getting answers, but it's a beginning. I tuck the pen behind my ear and realize, I'm not just angry anymore. I want to do something with it. The next meeting, I share what happened, not every detail, but enough. The hush that follows has a different weight than before. Respect, and something like belief. One woman leans over and whispers, "You're braver than you think." Her hand is warm on my arm. I let myself believe her, just for a moment, as I fill in my name on the volunteer sheet. I can't stop thinking about the nurse. Her face, closed off, lips pressed thin, eyes darting. Was she afraid, too? Or just tired of carrying secrets that never belonged to her? I replay our last conversation, each clipped word, each pause that stretched a little too long. There's a bitter taste at the back of my throat. I want to ask her why, but maybe I don't really want the answer. Every time I walk by the hospital, the automatic doors sigh open, and I remember how small I felt that night. But now, that smallness twists into something else. A need to push back against the quiet, to make sure nobody else is left with questions that hurt more than the truth. Late at night, I sit with the old test sheet on my lap, the revisions circled in red. My fingers trace the lines. I wonder how many other sheets have changed overnight, how many other stories are folded between these sterile pages, never spoken aloud. Real change, I'm learning, isn't as clean as an email or a checklist. It's ugly, uncomfortable. It means facing the ways good people do bad things when the pressure cracks them open. It means not looking away, even when the truth leaves a bruise. I close my eyes and breathe in, slow and shaky. Maybe forgiveness starts with understanding, not just the system, but the people inside it. I'm not sure I'm there yet. But I keep showing up, even when it's hard, because somewhere in all this mess, I still believe things can be better. Tomorrow, there's another meeting. I wonder if I'll see the nurse there, sitting in the back, face half in shadow. I wonder what I'll say if I do. The printer's low whine blends with the beeps and chattering voices spiraling through the nurse's station, a mess of clipboards, takeout cups, and the sharp sting of disinfectant in the air. Alina's voice cuts through, terse and tired. Chart 22B needs scanning, now. I reach for the folder, hands clammy, eyes darting across the day's lists and flagged labs. Machines whir, a phone rings, someone laughs down the hall, but my scalp prickles with that old, familiar heat. Too many charts, too little time, the fear of missing a signature or a dose. My breath comes shallow as I shuffle through the pile, fingers smarting from dry paper and chemical soap. There's no rhythm, not anymore, only the insistent push to get records filed, patients turned over, beds replaced, all before lunch vanishes into dinner. The station door swings open, a gust of cold following Dr. Ramesh's clipped footsteps. Meds for 14C? Where's the update? I almost drop the folder, pulse jumping at the edge in his voice, the way everyone flinches and moves a beat faster. I swallow against the bitter tang at the back of my throat, the pressure building in my temples. If I let the system slip, if I make it worse, the fallout lands in my lap. The records are supposed to protect us, but lately, they feel like traps. I scribble my initials, force my shoulders down, and promise myself I'll check every line, every time. Alina's hand lands on my arm, gentle for a second. Don't burn out, she mutters, but there's no space for comfort here, not really. I nod, half listening, half counting down to shift change, not knowing yet that today's pile is different. A faint coffee stain curls at the edge of a new folder, Ward 6, Post-op, Ramirez. I flip it open, squinting at the night nurse's notes, my own scribbled lines from earlier, and something stings. The dosage for ampicillin is wrong, changed in digital ink. My heart thuds. I trace my writing, 0.5 grams, clear as day. But the chart now reads 1 gram, initialed by me, in a neat, careful scrawl that isn't mine. I blink, trying to steady my breath, pulse ringing in my ears. My hands hesitate, as if the paper might burn. I check the timestamp, then the scanned record, then my original notes. Something's off. Did I write the wrong dose? Did I forget? My cheeks flare hot and I look up, as if someone might be watching. A pinprick of doubt lodges beneath my ribs. If this went to pharmacy, if someone caught the error, whose fault would it be? I run my nail along the folder's edge, searching for an explanation, but the only answer is a creeping chill that I can't shake. Maybe it's a typo. Maybe, but the signature is wrong, and my name is on it. I close the folder, wishing I could erase the last 5 minutes. A tray clatters at the end of the hall, making me flinch. I pass the folder to the scanner, but my eyes wander to the next chart. Another post-op, another small, impossible change. A pain score erased, a signature moved, the vital signs cleaned up in a way that makes my stomach knot. I check my badge, the times, the initials, mine, but not mine. For a second, the noise of the ward drops away, just the sound of my own breathing, ragged and shallow. Pages flick between my hands, each one heavier than the last. I flip through 3 more surgical cases and find the same thing. Edits after the fact, all clean and official looking, all with my name. A cold sweat breaks at the base of my neck. Am I losing track? Is someone covering for me, or setting me up? The idea pulses, raw and ugly, beneath my skin. I check the digital logs, then the paper trail, but the feeling grows. This is bigger than one mistake, bigger than me. I glance at Elena, who's tapping at her phone, oblivious. I almost ask, but the words stick. If I'm seeing a pattern, will anyone else? Or will they just see my signature, my supposed mistakes, painted over the record? I slip the fourth file under the pile, careful not to let my hands tremble. The air feels thinner, as if the whole station is holding its breath. For the first time, I wonder if these charts are supposed to look this way, and what's really at stake if they don't. The office lights flicker as the evening shift arrives, and I'm left with a chart that I'm told, firmly, almost too quietly, needs to be shredded. Dr. Ramesh stands across from me, eyes narrowed, voice smooth. End of shift. That file's not needed anymore. He doesn't smile. My fingers go numb on the folder. Everything I've ever learned says follow protocol, protect privacy, never make a copy. But the edits, the signatures that aren't mine, coil in my mind. I weigh the folder in my palm, the rules against the sick certainty that if I obey, something awful will slip away with the shredded paper. Sweat prickles along my spine as I move to the scanner, hands shaking so badly I almost drop the folder again. I slip a sheet into my own bag, telling myself it's just for tonight, just to be sure. I hear myself breathing too loud. Someone laughs behind the medication cart, and I freeze, waiting for the world to shatter. The forbidden chart feels hot through the canvas of my bag, every footstep in the hallway louder than it should be. I keep my voice level as I hand over the rest, but inside, the fear has teeth. If I'm caught, it's over. If I'm not, what will I find on that page, now that it's mine? The station clock ticks, relentless, as I walk out. The night air hits me sharp and metallic, breath fogging. I pull my bag close to my chest and wonder if I just crossed a line I can't come back from. Noreen's sneakers squeaked on the linoleum as she leaned over the nurse's station, flipping through charts. The soft hum of the fluorescent lights overhead felt too bright, too exposed. I waited until she finished jotting her note, then cleared my throat just enough for her to glance up. She raised an eyebrow, her mouth half curved into that knowing little smile. You need something? I kept my voice low. Can I talk to you? Somewhere quiet? She eyed the clock, then nodded me toward the empty med supply room. Inside, the air was cool and sterile, sharp with the scent of alcohol wipes. I closed the door behind us, heart thudding, and pulled the duplicate chart from my bag, edges already wrinkled from how many times I'd handled it. Noreen, look at this. My fingers trembled as I unfolded the pages. These notes, they're not the same. There's stuff missing from the official version. She took the sheets, scanning them with a practiced frown. Her lips pressed tight. I could see her pulse fluttering at her temple. Who else knows? She whispered. I shook my head. I don't think anyone. Not for sure. She handed the chart back, her hands stiff. This is dangerous, you know. A shiver ran through me. Not just fear, something colder, more isolating. I had to tell someone. Noreen searched my face for a moment, then squeezed my hand. Be careful, okay? Don't trust anyone until you're sure. Her warning followed me out, lingering like a shadow. But now I wasn't alone, and that changed everything, at least, I hoped it did. I heard my supervisor before I saw her, her heels clicking hard down the corridor, echoing off the beige walls. When she stopped in front of me, her face was arranged into a smile that didn't touch her eyes. We need to talk, she said, already steering me toward her office. The door swung shut behind us with a soft, final click. Sunlight slanted through the blinds, striping her desk in pale gold. She didn't waste time. I've heard you've been asking questions about records. That's not your concern, is it? My throat tightened. A patient's notes were changed. There's a copy that. Her hand chopped the air, cutting me off. Enough. This hospital has a reputation to protect. We don't need rumors or people digging for trouble where there isn't any. I pressed my palms flat against my thighs, trying not to let them see how my hands shook. There's a reason for everything that happens here, she said, softer now but with steel underneath. You start challenging that, you put your license at risk. You understand? The word risk landed heavy in my chest. I wanted to speak, to ask who was protecting who, but my tongue felt too thick. She picked up a pen, tapping it against her blotter. Go back to work. Let the doctors and administration handle paperwork discrepancies. I left her office dizzy, air thick with unsaid threats. I was supposed to let it go. Just another cog, silent and forgettable. But I couldn't shake the sense I was being watched, or the knowledge that I was already in too deep. The doctor's lounge was quiet for once, just Dr. Patel hunched over his phone, scrolling with tired fingers. I hesitated, then stepped inside, clutching the altered chart behind a folder. Dr. Patel, can I ask you something? He didn't look up. I'm behind, make it quick. I slid the chart onto the table. Did you write this note? He finally glanced over, eyes flicking from the page to my face, carefully unreadable. That's my signature. I flipped to the hospital's official version. But this line, it's missing. The recommendation for further testing. He shrugged, leaning back. I document what I see. What the system prints out, that's out of my hands. My jaw clenched. Someone changed it after you signed? He looked at me like I was being difficult on purpose. I'm not involved in administration. If there's a problem, take it up with medical records. His indifference burned. A patient could have died because of this. He stared a beat too long, then stood, gathering his ID badge. I have patients to see. You really want to keep poking your nose into this? The door closed behind him, leaving the faint tang of his cologne and the weight of his warning. My fists curled. He was hiding something. Maybe they all were. And suddenly, anger cut through the fear, sharp and bracing. In the break room, the window was propped open, letting in the distant grind of a garbage truck and the smell of hot asphalt. I sank onto the vinyl bench beside Mark and Lena, both hunched over their coffee cups. I lowered my voice. Were either of you on shift during Mrs. Bennett's last admission? Mark stared into his mug. Yeah, why? I slid my fingers over the edge of the table, feeling its worn seam. Did you notice anything off with the paperwork? Lena glanced up, eyes darting to the door. I saw her chart. It wasn't right, but I didn't say anything. Nobody does. Mark's voice was barely a whisper. If you report it, you disappear. That's what happened to Terry, remember? My breath caught. Terry had just stopped showing up. No explanations, no goodbyes. Someone's changing things, I said, my words barely audible. If we don't, who will? Lena shook her head, her hands trembling. It's not worth it. We have families. Their fear felt contagious, threading through my own doubts. But underneath, something stubborn refused to let go. A page crackled over the intercom, pulling us back. Code blue, room 312. I stood, heart in my throat, wondering what would be altered in that patient's chart next. I stared at the blue-white glow of my laptop, the cursor blinking in the middle of a search box. I typed, healthcare whistleblower consequences, and hesitated, my hands numb against the keys. The hum of the fridge in my tiny kitchen sounded too loud. The hospital's logo flashed through my memory, crisp and official, reminding me where all the power lived. My breath caught shallow in my chest. Paragraph after paragraph spilled across the screen. Retaliation, blacklisting, lawsuits. Whistleblowers lost licenses, got buried under investigations, sometimes ended up unemployable. I scrolled compulsively, each headline another cold finger up my spine. I thought of my rent, my badge, the patients who said thank you, who trusted the system because they had to. The people I'd wanted to help, and the debt I still owed on my degree. If I blew this up, if I made it real, what would be left? I shut the browser, but the dread didn't go anywhere. I imagined myself standing in front of the nurse manager, chart in one hand, career in the other. Would anyone believe me, or would I just disappear under paperwork and silence, like everyone else who tried? I bit the inside of my cheek, staring at the wall, and listened for any sign that it might get easier if I waited. At the nurse's desk, the overhead lights made everything look like it was underwater. The shift was almost over when Mrs. Fenwick's name came up on the monitor again. Same room, same gray eyes, but this time with a red band alerting complications. She'd been discharged 2 days ago. I remembered her smile, the way she'd squeezed my hand before leaving, trusting the plan we'd set up. Now, as I walked into her room, she looked smaller, hunched under the scratchy hospital blanket with bruises blooming down her arm. Her daughter was arguing softly with a resident in the corner, voice clipped and tired. The chart on the screen said, routine post-op, nothing about the rapid pulse or the confusion that hadn't made sense to me back then. My chest tightened. I remembered the copy I kept, what it really said, the details scrubbed from the official record. A different wound, a different code, a warning I'd circled in pen that never appeared in the discharge summary. Mrs. Fenwick looked at me, her lips trembling as she whispered, "What did I do wrong?" My fingers dug into the railing, cold metal under my skin. She hadn't done anything. I had. Or maybe I hadn't done enough. Her chart, my copy, was locked in my bag, burning a hole through every justification I told myself. I swallowed hard, the taste sour in my mouth, and tried to meet her eyes, but all I saw was the gap between the truth and the record. I wanted to say something that would fix it, but the words wouldn't come. The hallway smelled of disinfectant and coffee gone bitter in the air. Someone called my name, too sharp, too fast, and I turned to see Brian, the admin from compliance, waving me over by the elevators. His shirt collar was crooked, and he kept glancing over his shoulder. I followed him, heart thumping, into the empty consultation room. He locked the door behind us, fingers shaking, and didn't bother with small talk. "We're exposed," he said, voice rough. "Too many questions about the Fenwick case. The board is terrified of a lawsuit. If this gets out, we could lose funding. Maybe the whole wing." He slid a folder across the table, the plastic slick with nervous sweat. I saw my signature on one of the pages. He leaned in, close enough that I could smell mint and something sour. "They'll pin it on whoever they can. If you have anything outside the official record, you need to think about what happens next." My pulse banged in my ears. There were too many eyes, too many ways this could go wrong. But Brian's face wasn't just scared, it was asking for something, compliance, maybe, or silence. I pictured the folder in my bag, the duplicate chart, the notes in my handwriting. Suddenly it felt like a weight chained to my ankle. I nodded, unsure if I was agreeing or just stalling for time. Brian's hand hovered over the folder before he slid it back, eyes sharp, mouth pulled tight. "We're watching each other now. I hope you understand." Then he was gone, and the air in the room felt thinner, like the ceiling had lowered another inch. I was halfway to the break room when I heard my name again, this time from behind me, clipped and cold. I turned to see Sandra, the unit manager, holding a familiar manila envelope. She stepped close, her eyes on mine, and said, "We need to talk about the chart you copied." The words hit my chest like a punch. I went cold all over. I scanned her face for some hint of mercy, but all I saw was calculation. "I don't know what you mean," I managed, but my voice cracked. She held up the envelope, lips pressed tight. "Don't play dumb. You know what this means, for you and for us. Where is the original?" My hand shook as I gripped the strap of my bag. For a second, I thought about running, just bolting down the hall, out of the building, never looking back. But I couldn't move. She waited, eyes unmoving. The silence stretched, heavy as lead. "I just wanted to make sure nothing got missed," I whispered. "That's not your call anymore," she said. "Think about your future. You have until tomorrow morning." She turned and left, the envelope hanging from her hand like a threat. The clock above the desk glowed 3:41 a.m., the minute hand sweeping through another eternity. I sat at the end of the corridor, the duplicate chart in my lap, back pressed into the worn vinyl of the bench. The hospital was silent except for a distant beep and the low hum of vents. I stared at the chart. My handwriting circled things no one else wanted to see. I could shred it, walk away, pretend the edits were a mistake. Maybe keep my job, maybe no one would find out. But Mrs. Fenwick's bruised arm wouldn't leave my mind. The feeling of Brian's folder scraping across the table. Sandra's eyes, hard and final. My throat was raw, my hands sweaty on the paper. I could call the hotline. I could send an email to the board, copy the state. I could do nothing, but either way, someone would lose. I closed my eyes. My pulse hammered, but somewhere underneath was a line, thin, trembling, but real. A line I couldn't cross without losing myself. The chart felt impossibly heavy as I folded it in half. I stood, legs shaky, and walked down the corridor. Every step was louder than the last. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, yellow light spilling onto the tile. I stepped inside, clutching the chart, and pressed the button for the lobby. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, all I could do was decide if I was brave enough to bring the truth into the light, or if I'd let it sink with me. The click of my pen echoed far too loud in the tiny office, the tip jittering as I tried to steady my hand. The complaint form glared up at me in harsh hospital lighting, its blank fields daring me to fill them. My heart hammered against my ribs, each word I wrote like a match struck in the dark. I pressed harder, forcing my handwriting to be legible. Every fact, every date, the details of the altered chart and what I'd seen. My mind snapped through the sequence with a cold, electric focus. My throat tightened, remembering the moment I'd found the duplicate record locked in Maria's drawer, the way the paper didn't quite match, the faintest scent of correction fluid lingering at the edges. It was all here now, in black ink, with my name at the bottom. I swallowed, the taste of metal lingering, and slid the finished form across the desk to the administrator. She didn't look up as she took it. Instead, she cleared her throat and said, barely more than a whisper, "You understand what this means, don't you?" I nodded, jaw rigid. The shape of things had shifted. I was no longer just a nurse, now I was the problem. But something in me steadied, a sense of direction settling into my spine. I stood, shoulders squared, and left the office without looking back. In the hall, fluorescent lights flickered. For the first time in weeks, I noticed the sharpness of their hum. It was out of my hands now, and I almost felt a kind of relief. But the next steps waited, coiled and silent, just around the next corner. The morning after I filed the report, the hospital changed. First, it was a stream of unfamiliar faces in stiff suits, badges clipped to their jackets, moving with a kind of brittle urgency. The air buzzed with nervous energy. Even the nurses' lounge, usually a refuge, felt invaded. A door banged open down the hallway and two auditors strode past, their voices low and clipped, trailing the scent of cold coffee and aftershave. I caught fragments, protocol deviation, authorization signatures missing, as they swept by. My pulse jumped whenever someone in a suit glanced my way. In the break room, people talked in hushed, broken sentences. Maria was nowhere. I poured coffee, my hand shaking so badly I spilled some onto the counter. My supervisor, Dr. Riles, breezed in with a forced smile, but her eyes darted from face to face. "Everyone will be interviewed. Just cooperate," she said, voice tinny like she couldn't get enough air. I wondered if she knew how quickly trust could dissolve. Each time my phone buzzed, I jumped. My turn with the legal team came in a windowless room that reeked of disinfectant and old carpet. They flipped through charts and asked the same question in 3 different ways, their eyes unblinking. My answers felt thin, barely enough to cover the silence after the last question. The hospital PA system stuttered overhead, a muffled code blew somewhere on another floor. I left the room feeling scraped raw, longing for the mindless rhythm of the med cart. In the corners of the unit, people whispered behind their hands. Shadows stretched longer in the late afternoon light. There was no escape from the sense of things unraveling. It didn't take long for the whispers to find a target. By midweek, I couldn't cross the nurses' station without catching the quick flicker of eyes, the sudden hush that followed my footsteps. Jenna, who used to split night shifts with me, stopped me at the vending machine. Her voice was sharp, a little too loud. "So you're the reason we're all under the microscope?" Something twisted low in my gut. I searched her face, looking for the old warmth, but found only a hard, wary set to her jaw. "I did what I had to," I said, the words feeling brittle, rehearsed. She snorted. "You could have come to us first. Now everyone's scared for their jobs. You get that, right?" The floor felt unstable beneath me, like I'd stepped out onto ice. My mouth went dry. In the background, someone slammed a drawer, metal on metal, punctuating the tension. I tried to answer, but she'd already turned away, her shoulders rigid. Down the hall, 2 other nurses leaned together, voices low and urgent. I caught my name, then a word that stung: traitor. The loneliness settled in, heavy as lead. Even the patients seemed to sense it, their questions softer, more cautious. I still moved through my tasks, but everything felt exposed. There was no going back to how things had been, not for me, not for anyone. And still, the investigation pressed on, relentless. News of suspensions came in waves, a text in the early morning, a trembling voice at the end of a long shift. Maria was gone before sunrise, her locker emptied, badge surrendered. I watched as security wheeled out a box of her things, the echo of their footsteps ringing down the corridor. Rumors churned, some nurses reassigned, others put on leave. At the next staff meeting, administration listed new policies in a monotone, words like zero tolerance and mandatory reporting, bouncing off cinderblock walls. I sat in the back, hands folded, barely listening. My mind drifted to the altered chart, the moment I'd realized what was at stake. The loss radiated outward, jobs, friendships, the fragile web that had held our team together. Even the simple rhythms of care had changed, each order double-checked, each note scrutinized for hidden flaws. After the meeting, Dr. Riles found me alone at the breakroom table, eyes rimmed red. She hesitated, then said, "Sometimes doing the right thing, it costs more than you think." Her voice trembled, and I saw in her face the sum of everything we'd lost. Certainty, camaraderie, the sense that we could trust each other, even on the worst nights. I nodded, barely able to meet her gaze. In the silence that followed, the weight of my decision settled heavy in my chest. The hospital still buzzed around us, but something vital felt hollowed out. Even as policy shifted and investigations wrapped, I knew the consequences would linger, echoing in every cautious glance and every silence that fell when I entered a room. But as I sat there, staring at the empty chair across from me, I realized I'd traded comfort for something else, a strange, uneasy clarity. And I couldn't help wondering what price would be asked next. The hallway hums with fluorescent light, almost too bright after the windowless weeks. I walk slower than I used to, each step weighted with the memory of what I set loose. The nurse's station is quieter now, some faces missing, some glancing up and quickly away. I pause by the charting computer, running my fingers over the keys, half expecting to see my own name flagged in red. My chest tightens. There's no comfort in this victory, only the hollow echo of what it cost. I sip burnt coffee from a chipped mug, the taste anchoring me here when my mind wants to drift. My badge still opens the supply closet, but every beep is a reminder. I'm on borrowed time. They say the investigation changed things for the better, but I see the caution behind every conversation, the hesitance in every chart note, as if honesty is a wound we're all afraid to reopen. I wonder if the patient's family ever sensed the truth beneath the hospital's careful words. Maybe part of me hopes they didn't. I hear a chair scrape behind me and tense, thinking it's another meeting, another round of questions. But it's just Carla, her voice lower than usual. You did what you had to. My pulse slows, just a little. The words don't erase the days of doubt, but they settle around me, quiet, steady. I gave up friendships, maybe my future here, for a truth I couldn't unsee. I can live with that, I think, even as the fear lingers. I look down at my hands, steady now, not shaking. Whatever happens next, I'll know I didn't look away. It's raining when I step into the hospital lobby, the echo of my shoes softer against fresh carpet, newer, cleaner, deliberate. At the desk, there's a new protocol binder, thick and pristine, its tabs color-coded and pristine like it's never been touched. I hover at the edge of the nurse's station, watching as Sonia, one of the shift leads, enters her password for the 10th time. Each login now tracked, every access point pinged to her badge. A tremor slips through my chest, half anticipation, half dread, as I scan the posted notice above the med cabinets. All chart modifications subject to audit. Anonymous reporting available. I look for the old faces, some are gone, but a few meet my eyes, holding them with a mix of gratitude and wariness. The air is different here, sharper, less heavy, like the building itself is bracing for change. There's a tension in the way staff speak in lowered voices, a quickness in how they gather when a supervisor passes through. I listen as a junior nurse mutters, "You think this'll actually protect us?" And the older nurse beside her shrugs, lips pressed tight. I catch my breath, the memory of those duplicate charts flickering behind my eyes, but the binder is real. The audits are real. The risk is no longer invisible, and neither is the safety net. For the first time in months, there's a steadiness in my pulse. The hospital feels less like a trap and something closer to what it was meant to be. Still, there's a caution under everything. As I pass the old break room, Sonia calls out, "Hey, you coming back?" Her voice is light, but her eyes search mine, hoping for more than I can give right now. I pause, the weight of the past pressing up from the floor tiles, and shake my head gently. Not yet, but maybe. I leave her with that, an unfinished promise, and myself with the possibility. Weeks later, I sit in a room far from the hospital, the air humming with voices layered one over another. My hands rest on a folder that's grown thick with emails from nurses, doctors, aides, stories that are too large to hold alone. The clock on the wall ticks with a metronome's certainty, and every so often, someone knocks quietly and slips in, dropping their own envelope onto the growing pile. There's a map tacked to the wall, pins marking clinics, hospitals, urgent care centers. I trace the lines between them, feeling the faint stick of adhesive where I've moved the pins once, twice, 3 times. Outside, the city moves, loud and indifferent, but in here, the air is warm and close, charged with something like hope. Across the table, Jo slides over a stack of pamphlets. "We've got 3 more on board," she says, and her smile is nervous but fierce. Her sleeve brushes against my arm. You ready? I nod, feeling the old anxiety ripple up, then settle. These are the stories we'll fight for now, the quiet reports, the altered charts, the patterns that never made sense until someone dared to keep a copy. The fight isn't over, but I am not alone in it. When I look at the growing heap of envelopes, I think, for the first time, that the truth might actually have a chance.